Is that actually Commissioner Nadeau in the participant list, or is that Allie?
I do believe the council member will be joining us for the meeting tonight.
Yeah, the council member's at the top of the agenda.
Got it.
Okay, why don't we get started while we wait for Commissioner Dendy. Okay, Gordon, could you be on the lookout for when Commissioner Dendy joins so you can promote her?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, well, hello everyone. Thanks for joining the August meeting of ANC 1C. I'll start with some introductions. I'll start with myself in 1C01. I'm Amir Irani. I'm chair of the commission, and I'm also commissioner for 1C01, which is the southwest corner of Adams Morgan. I'll move on to my colleague, Commissioner Guthrie, 1C03. You're on mute, Commissioner Guthrie.
Ted Guthrie, ANC 1C03, the heart of Adams Morgan, Wyoming to Biltmore, 18th to 19th.
Let's go to Commissioner Zatoli.
Hi, I'm John Zotoli in 1C04, which is mainly Lanier Heights and includes the lovely Walter Pierce Park, which is right behind me here.
Commissioner Wright.
I'm Commissioner Wright. I'm in 1C06. That's the northeastern corner of Adams Morgan.
Commissioner Bowles, hey.
Hello, my name is Japer Bowles, and I'm the commissioner for 1C07, which is the west side of the Reed Cook neighborhood, essentially the entire east part of 18th Street, and a block of Lanier from Joseph's house to Phil's Coffee.
And Commissioner Jackson.
Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Jackson, and I represent 1C08, which is the southeasternmost corner of Adams Morgan.
And I see that Commissioner Dendy has joined the meeting, but let's get her.
She's coming up right now.
There we go. And Commissioner Dendy for 1C05, please, your introduction.
Hi, I'm Damiana. I'm the commissioner for 1C05, and I'm the northernmost district.
Great. So going to officers' reports, the chair's report. I have a couple things I wanted to talk about, but I will actually. There's nothing to report really. I'll leave these few items for the announcements section. So moving to Secretary's report.
I have nothing to report. We'll have the meeting minutes in the consent agenda.
And Treasurer?
Yes, so I will need a preliminary motion for some of you folks and to the public. I moved again, yay, renter's life. It was a unit directly above my previous unit. So per ANC bylaw or per ANC law, there needs to be a record of where the checks for our banking accounts is located, and that will need to be changed. So I will need that. So whenever we get down to the regular agenda, I will need someone to help me with that. And then The QFRs are also on the consent agenda. I will ask if Michaela could pull those up whenever we get to that section. And then if anyone has any questions about the Treasury report, we are doing a revised FQ2. There was just a few errors that were corrected and pointed out by Amir, as well as the Office of OANC. Nothing too crazy, and I can talk more about that when that time comes. But that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Commissioner Bowles and our great treasurer. So moving on to committee announcements and commissioner announcements. So I'll lead this one out. So a couple of things. One, outdoor pools are closed for the remainder of the outdoor pool season. So big womp there. Another big womp, indoor pools are closed until further notice, if you didn't already know that. I do want to bring to everyone's attention that the census deadline for self-response will be, this is a brand new thing. It was October 31st, and now it's September 30th. So all field operations will end by September 30th for the census. So if you haven't already, it's been moved up, and it will be delivered to the White House by the end of the year, the full count. So if you haven't already responded, please go to census.gov to respond. I think our response rate is around 59 or 60%, which is I think it's about pace with national, but it's a little bit behind. And our particular ANC is ahead of things in Ward 1, but that doesn't mean that we don't have work to do. I think we're around 62 or 63%. So if you haven't already responded, please go online to respond. And then the last announcement I have is really a sad one, because Commissioner Wright is leaving us. This is her last meeting with us. She's moving out and moving away from DC. And it's been a pleasure working with her. She's been a reliable colleague and a steady voice. So I appreciate, and I'm sure we all appreciate your service. That's all I have for announcements. So let's keep going down the line. And there are no committee meetings for this month. Commissioner Guthrie.
Yeah, the only announcement I have came from the DC police, and they've noticed a real uptick in cars being stolen that are left for a minute while still running. I understand, particularly in hot weather, the inclination to keep the air conditioning going when you pop out to do errands. But when you do that, you are just sort of asking for somebody to hop in the driver's seat and drive it away. So please do not do that anymore. Turn off your car if you're getting out of the car and you're the only one in the car, okay?
Thank you, Commissioner Guthrie. Commissioner Dendy?
I don't have any announcements.
Commissioner Wright?
Just want to thank everyone. I'll miss you all. Amir, thanks for the nice words. And feel free to contact me at my personal email while I'm in Seattle.
Art. Commissioner Bowles?
Yeah, so first off, thank you so much, Michaela. You've been a great partner in the Reed Cook neighborhood, helped us reinvigorate the Reed Cook Neighborhood Association. We've done like numerous trash cleanups, but just helping constituents and residents together. I'm really gonna miss my partnership with you. So thank you so much for all that you've done. In terms of personal, or in terms of ANC stuff, I did want to introduce a resolution today. This is very timely. It relates to the DC Board of Elections. Essentially, they are asking for rapid response feedback for the secure Dropbox ballots that we requested in a previous resolution, as well as feedback on polling places and early election sites. So I recently forwarded a resolution to you folks, and I would love to have a second so it could be placed on the agenda when that time comes.
Okay. Thanks for that lead up, Commissioner Bowles.
Thank you.
Commissioner Jackson?
Also, just thank you again, Michaela, for all your help, and good luck with your move. My only announcement is I have since filed for election since the last meeting.
Okay. Okay. Great. And so going on to our esteemed council member, Nadeau, thanks for joining. Please go. I know you have a couple of things to say pertaining to the budget. So please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you. And I also want to thank Commissioner Wright for her service, and we will miss her. And thanks to all those of you who are running again. We definitely need to keep our ANCs operating at full capacity. So I appreciate all of you. Before I jump into the budget, I'm here to bring an update from the council. It's a thing we do periodically. It's a thing we used to do together in person. But I'm glad to be back. Last time I was here, I believe I was swearing in Commissioner Jackson with some help from Zoe. So glad to be back. And before I jump into the budget, want to mention a couple things we also did legislatively for the Adams Morgan bid over the past couple months. Was able to get them reauthorized through the budget permanently. And then also we did an emergency that will allow them to reduce the amount of fees that folks are paying during the public health emergency, which we tried every which way to do without having to legislate. But sometimes at the end of the day, you just have to pass a law. So that should be our motto, I guess, at the council. But just wanted to let you all know we are working to make sure that all of our businesses in Adams Morgan are able to make ends meet. And I want to thank everybody also in the ANC who helped us get the open streets plan. We are not giving up on that. Continuing to work together with the executive to reopen safely so that folks can enjoy all that Adams Morgan has to offer with better use of public space and open space. So we'll keep on that. But it is a special time of year. Unusually, this is now the special budget time of year. We normally do all of this by the end of May, but because of the public health emergency, our budget season was compressed. So last week, we took our final vote on the FY21 budget, which begins October 1st. I'm the chair of the Committee on Human Services. And so I brought my focus to the budget once again on helping our most vulnerable people. You know, the mayor worked very hard to make sure that we didn't have to make draconian cuts. But we on the council felt like this was also a time we needed to make enhancements to really help folks. And we had a majority of council members who agreed, and we were able to do what we call some revenue raisers. So I'm going to walk you through that. But we were able to find about $63 million more to spend on public needs by introducing several amendments. So I introduced an amendment building on what I did last year to eliminate the qualified high-tech tax credit. That was primarily helping large companies, and our CFO had indicated in a very long report in 2018 that it has largely been ineffective in recruiting new companies and retaining them and creating new jobs here. So that actually, my amendment generated $17 million in new funds and redirected them to critical human services and health programs. So first, it allowed us to fund legislation to solidify commitments we'd made to immigrants through the Health Program Alliance. My bill reduced the number of times a person has to come in person to recertify, this is the only program we have that requires twice a year in-person recertification, concerns about fraud and all kinds of things that really don't reflect us as a progressive city and our values and how we treat vulnerable people. So my bill eliminated one of those in-person visits, but cost money. So I found the funding for that. We're really thrilled about it. I think it's going to make a big difference, and we don't want people losing their coverage during a public health emergency. And we don't want people having to have unnecessary interactions with the government when they are undocumented either. So this is a really big step forward. I also was able to end homelessness for 180 families or individuals with this amendment, and allocated assistance for excluded workers who are cash-based and who've been shut out of federal COVID-19 assistance programs. Also established grants for early childhood providers. Many are at risk of closing due to the pandemic, and we need them to stick around. And I was also able to invest in school-based mental health services, which is a really critical program in our communities, and something we need to be investing in even more now as children are dealing with isolation and fear that goes along with being in a public health emergency. So that was my amendment. So that was 17 million. And then my colleague, Charles Allen, introduced an amendment to delay a tax break for corporations. And that was an additional $7 million that we were able to use for emergency rental assistance, housing, more funding towards our excluded workers, violence prevention, and more for school-based mental health. We need a lot for school-based mental health, and we're going to keep putting money in that pot. Councilmember Trayon White introduced an amendment that passed to reduce the exemption level for the DC estate tax from 5.6 million to 4 million. And with that funding of about $1.78 million, we invested in services for youth impacted by violence. We had one more amendment, actually two more that didn't pass, just so you know, for those of you who are keeping track, and I voted for all of them, but Councilmember Allen also supported an amendment to raise taxes on residents making more than $250,000 a year. And that would essentially mean paying an extra $1,800 a year in taxes, and it would have raised an extra $12 million, but it failed 5 to 8. And then Councilmember Robert White introduced an amendment to redirect funds allocated for the streetcar to invest in public housing repairs, and that failed. But we still were able to allocate $50 million in funds for public housing repairs for FY21, which was double the amount that we have for this year. So those were the revenue raisers. I want to also just quickly talk about some other human services investments and then MPD, which was a very important topic this year. So in addition to the amendment I moved as chairperson of the Committee on Human Services, I also had the opportunity to increase funding for emergency rental assistance by 1.26 million. So the total we're going to have in the bucket for emergency rental assistance going into the next year is $14 million, which sounds like a lot, but is probably not going to meet the entire need. So we're going to have to keep figuring this out. And Councilmember Bonds told me today that we're going to be having a roundtable on eviction prevention in the fall. So please keep up with us and join in that discussion if you'd like to. I was able to restore cuts to the homeless outreach program. So these are our folks who are out on the street day to day connecting homeless residents with services and housing. And it added additional 50 units of permanent supportive housing for individuals. That's the most robust intervention we have for someone who's been experiencing homelessness long-term. It's housing with robust wraparound services. They have until the end of time. And that's a focus I've had. Now, there was a lot of discussion this year around funding MPD, what level we should fund it. There was a rally to defund MPD, and we found those conversations to be really helpful in guiding us in the budget. MPD's proposed budget was around $600 million, which is pretty significant. What we did was we cut from a $19 million enhancement, we cut $15.1 million. So for people who wanted MPD's budget to be increased, they were kind of mad because we took 15.1 million. For people who wanted their budget to be decreased, they were also still kind of mad because only taking 15.1 million meant they still got about a $4 million enhancement. But however you look at it, we took the amount that was legally feasible to take based on the different contracts and things that were in place that had to be carried forward. And I think we've done a lot with what we took. So with that 15.1 million, we restored funds to the violence interruption program under the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement and the Office of the Attorney General. We funded stipends for the Pathways program, which is our intensive wraparound employment and anti-violence program. And we also put in some capital dollars to build out more space to host that program. We funded a public information campaign around my bill, the red flag law, that allows a family member, domestic partner, mental health professional, or police officer to remove a firearm or ammunition from someone who poses a danger to themselves or others. We added new staff to the Office of the Attorney General's truancy mediation program, which helps parents and students work through underlying issues that may be causing a student to miss school. We transferred funds to a reentry housing program. We made the Criminal Code Reform Commission permanent, so that establishes an independent agency that will pursue criminal code reform and best practices in criminal law. And we restored funds to the Justice Grants program at the Office of Victim Services and Justice Grants. We also invested funds to complete plans to build a new shelter for domestic violence victims and survivors. We talked a lot about what it would mean if MPD was not the lead on a lot of the programs that we know people need, right? So if someone's having a mental health crisis, you call 911, police come, but that's not really the intervention that we want, right? We don't want people to have to encounter police when what they need is care. So we reversed $5.5 million in cuts from the mayor's proposed budget to the behavioral health program. We added, we added funds to unlock $88 million, which are going to create over 600 new units of affordable housing, and an additional $9 million in funding to the Housing Production Trust Fund, which was critical because there are projects waiting in the pipeline right now that are eligible and would otherwise be funded, but for the lack of money in the pot. And then my program also, we funded a $2.5 million, the Immigrant Justice Legal Services Grant Program. So these are for our immigrants who are at risk of deportation or detention or need other legal services to become legal citizens. And this money gets spent every year. They probably could have used $5 million, but it was a really tough budget year given the economic downturn. So that's the summary. And I want to thank you for letting me share it with you. I think, 1C residents really, they follow these things, and I think it's important for them to hear directly what choices we made in the budget this year. That's just some of the highlights. And Mr. Chair, if there is time, I'm more than happy to take questions from you or anyone else you deem appropriate.
Well, thank you, Councilmember. I was just going to ask you that. Thanks. This ANC passed a resolution related to reducing the funding of MPD. And I know you went into great detail there, but also the council did a lot of good things even outside of the whole funding bit, right? Banning the use of tear gas and
right.
Hiring officers with previous misconduct on their record, banning the practice of hiring those. Are there any other things like that that are not related to money?
Yeah, we did an entire criminal justice reform bill. And I can tell you, actually, hold on a second, exactly what's in it. But those are a few things. I had the, what's it called? And I will also put a link in the chat for people to take a look. I had the legislation to ban the tear gas, and that worked, it got rolled into an emergency, but I think we're also going to have a hearing on it because there were some folks who felt like it just didn't go far enough, or we didn't get into all the nuances that they would have wanted. And we do have, we had a 1C resident who was actually, he's now blind in one eye from the pepper ball that he was sprayed with at Lafayette. So that was really a big problem. I'm going to put the link in there, but what I can tell you is it bans chokeholds. It releases body-worn camera video within 72 hours after an officer-involved fatality, and forbids officers from viewing the footage before writing their report. It strengthens the Office of Police Complaints independence and allows them to pursue investigations that officers witness but do not report. It requires additional training for officers on racism and white supremacy, and it requires MPD to identify themselves as local police during First Amendment demonstrations. There's definitely more to do. What I say about our police reform work is that we're kind of in the middle of it. So the NEAR Act which is the legislation that we passed. Oops, I sent that to panelists. Let me send it to everybody. The legislation we passed a couple of years ago, which is our public health approach to public safety, which is most of the things that I listed that we've reallocated funding for this year, has been sort of the conversation we've had up until now. Ever since George Floyd was murdered, we've really taken that to the next level and said, all right, what are the other things we need to examine? One of the big things that I've focused on is the stop and frisk issue that we have in the district. So the NEAR Act actually gave us a lot of data. It requires police to report in a lot more than they used to. And what we know is that use of force and stop and frisk in particular have been used disproportionately towards people of color all across the city, and oftentimes completely unwarranted stops. And so if you talk to MPD, they say, we don't do stop and frisk, but I would say the people who've been stopped and frisked would say otherwise. And I did an op-ed about this a couple of years ago. So that's something that I've been challenging the chief on, and we need to keep at it. So I think the chairman of the council announced a police, his list of police revision commission appointees this week. So I would urge you to take a look at that list. It's probably on his website at this point, but there's a Ward 1 ANC on there. The Greater Washington Urban League is a member. Black Swan Academy representing our youth. The director of SMILE, which represents our LGBTQ youth. So if you have input, you can also provide it to some of the commissioners as they're doing their work. They're meant to give their report by the end of the year.
Okay. Yeah, outside of the dollars, this type of reform is really needed, and thanks for having a sharp eye, an eagle eye over that.
Yeah, thank you.
So we do have some questions, just a couple hands raised. We'll start at the top. Piper?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much. My name is Piper Hendricks. I've lived in DC since 2005, and it's really encouraging to hear all of the work that you've been doing around police reform. And I've heard of efforts in surrounding areas, most specifically Northern Virginia, around restorative justice. I'm curious if there are plans to incorporate more of that in DC, and where we stand on that.
Awesome, thank you for that question. So I'm going to put here in the chat to all attendees a link to the program that the Attorney General has run since 2016. He's been a great leader on this issue. And for those of you who don't know, restorative justice is an opportunity to, it's different than sort of your traditional prosecution. It's an opportunity to repair. When someone commits a crime and then it harms another person, it's an opportunity for both parties to heal, to understand the consequences of what happened, and to really move forward in a way that doesn't necessarily involve really the end of the person's life by being incarcerated, right? I mean, you can make a mistake at a young age and end up in the prison pipeline, and that really changes your whole life forever. And so, certainly we want to make sure that there are consequences for actions that hurt other people, but restorative justice is a model that actually allows people to repair while we are holding them accountable. So I put that program in there. Our Attorney General, who's also duly elected every 4 years, same cycle as me, has been doing tremendous work on criminal justice reform. So I hope you'll check out what he's doing, because especially with juveniles, it's really tremendous.
And that's OAG at oag.dc.gov, right?
That's right. And I put a link to all attendees about the restorative justice program.
Perfect. Love it. We have another hand up, Swiderski.
Yeah, my question has to do sort of with, you mentioned, trying to get away from stop and frisk and similar things. And I was wondering about the idea of taking more of these sort of enforcement type actions out of the hands of police entirely. For example, when we're looking at the questions of people, wearing masks in public spaces, having that be something that the health department could have people handing out masks or writing people up for. Similarly to how we have, we don't have police handing out parking tickets. We could have other divisions, dealing with those kinds of tickets.
Yeah, I'm all for it. Thank you, J.I., and it's nice to hear from you. So a couple things. One is we, along with the AG, are examining the whole criminal code and thinking about what can we be decriminalizing. I'm not sure if you can hear, but Zoe's trying to join again tonight, so I apologize for that. So first of all is what, here's an example. I introduced a bill last week to decriminalize vending without a license. So meaning you have a food cart, you're out there, and you can actually be ticketed by DCRA already, but oftentimes people will just call the police. And it happened again today in Columbia Heights, where someone called the police on the vendors, and I'm then having to intervene and saying, hey, MPD, like, I know you have the authority, but could you just make the referral to DCRA and let's like keep you out of this, right? Because who are they hurting, right? There's some issues with, food handling, et cetera, that we need to work through. But in terms of just being unlicensed, I mean, that's not really, it doesn't need to be a crime. So part of it is looking at the criminal code. And I've begun that conversation also with the chief of police. The other thing is robust funding. So you heard me talk about behavioral health funding, homeless services, wraparound services. We're not funding any of that at nearly enough to just get rid of the police or any other person, any other entity. That's what we need to do. To really reform the system, we have to put our money where our mouth is. So when you look at, the MPD budget being almost $600 million a year, but our prevention services budget being about 15, for the first time now, 15, there's a huge issue there. So we gotta do that. But I think that's where we want to go, right? I mean, ideally you're calling 911 and the dispatcher knows exactly what agency is meant to respond. It's not just send MPD. It's a mental health crisis, then we'll send DBH. But we don't have staffing at that level right now. So if we just pulled the police back and had nothing, I don't think the community would feel supported in the way that it needs to, which isn't to say that they are feeling like all of the interventions are positive right now. We know that's not true, but we got to lay the infrastructure. So we've made some steps forward. We'll say there was some last minute jockeying in the budget that pulled back about $4 million from the behavioral health community-based services that I voted against. I was pretty ticked off about because it was actually a federally leveraged fund, which means the money we put in got matched at a certain percentage. And I hate leaving federal dollars on the table, especially for people who really need it. And so it's decisions like that I think we need to be holding all government leaders accountable for. And I'm happy to name names at a later time, but we don't want to get into all that tonight.
Thanks, Councilmember. I don't see any other hands raised, but
Damiana wants to ask a question.
Commissioner Dendy?
Yeah, I had a question. Well, yeah, more of like a statement. Anyway, but I'm really glad that you're here today. I got excited that you're going to be here. So, welcome. Good to see you again.
Thank you.
But yeah, I am really happy that we're talking about the budget. And, it's really hard for me to talk about the police because I've really never had a good experience with police. I know a lot of people I know have not. I just feel like it's always a constant struggle. People I know who have been just like playing music at home, trying to relax, and then the cops will be called on them for no reason because they think it's too loud or something. And honestly, it's not, but I guess that's just my opinion. But or when I went out to the protest and somebody mentioned this, cops not wearing masks, cops spitting and coughing on me during a pandemic. This is a very scary thing. Yeah. And at the same time, we're all in the streets protesting people who have been murdered. And so, it is hard for me to talk about. But I think that I'm glad that we have made some progress this year in terms of the MPD budget, but I am on the side of the defund people, advocates who were very disappointed by the extraordinarily bloated budget. And I think it's a real problem. And I understand that there is, FOP, the police union. But I think that it's going to be really, really, really important for the council to talk about the contract that is going to expire in September this year. And I don't think that there should be any more hiring of cops. I think there's no need to be doing that. Unfortunately, I met with Chairman Mendelson about this, and he was like, "Oh, we cut like 200 police officers." Frankly, that's not enough. We have so many police officers per capita, the highest in the country. We don't need all of these agencies. And right now, FOP represents about 114 agencies, I believe, in the district. And that needs to go down drastically. And now we have an opportunity this year in September to actually decrease, a lot, because the negotiations are coming up. And I think that I would like to see the council push the mayor, and the mayor is the one who signs off on the contract ultimately, to not include all of the leniency that is currently in the 30-page contract that they have, that gives them the right to retain so many police officers, because frankly, they're not helping our communities. They are not keeping us safe. And, so I'm glad that we're talking about restorative justice. I'm glad that there's no chokeholds and all of that. I don't think that's going to stop chokeholds. I don't think that banning anything is going to stop it from happening. I think we need to actually take action by getting rid of the root issue, which is the existence of a really racist police force that is not protecting people. And, I've just seen this over and over again, and I really don't think that we should miss this opportunity for this new contract negotiations. So I was just wondering, have you been thinking about the upcoming negotiations and how the council can push for a contract that is actually more beneficial for the people of this city, rather than the police unions that frankly shouldn't even exist, in my opinion, but shouldn't have as much power as they do?
Yeah. Well, the answer is no, but I will now. We're just trying to get through the budget and think about what's next. But I think that that's a really good point. And on top of that, one thing we did do was add terms to the chief position. So before it was just the chief would serve unlimited after first appointment. And now they have to be reappointed and reconfirmed after a period, which I think at least allows a little bit more accountability from the top. But I think you're right. I mean, the behavior we see and sort of the talking points we hear really are the same from top to bottom, which just really, in my mind, indicates the need for major changes. So I don't know yet how we get to insert ourselves in that process. I haven't tried it before, but it's certainly something that I'll spend some time thinking about, and I appreciate that. I also saw there was one comment, if I have time, in the chat about, it said, we need MPD to enforce quality of life crimes like public urination and drinking and doing drugs in public. I would challenge that by saying, we certainly don't want people to be doing drugs in the public or drinking or urinating. But also that not a lot of good comes from the police being the ones who enforce that. And I think, if you see, especially the drug use, public urination and drinking tied together, maybe a little bit in Adams Morgan could be related also just to nightlife and sort of a typical night. But the drug use in particular is a behavioral health issue that's related to addiction, and arresting someone for drug use is not going to solve the problem. And what they really need is treatment. And so when we talk about robust investments in these programs, that's really what's needed. Part of the conversation around decrim is going to be things like, open container laws and, drinking in public, and whether it's worth someone going to jail for that, or whether that's just a citation. And I think we really need to think about how that stuff is enforced in a way that's meaningful, that actually solves the problem, that prevents it from happening in the future. And I personally don't think police are the answer to that. I think, we have other entities that can help us with that, but they're not set up to do it right now. And so that's where we need to go. So just my 2 cents.
Commissioner Zatoli.
Thank you, Chair. Councilmember Nadeau, thank you for joining us this evening. I wanted to flag an issue for your attention. Later on this evening, we're going to be taking up the issue of a spurious decision that zoning administrator Matthew LeGrant made, paving the way for construction that, in my view, is a clear violation of zoning regulations.
Okay.
And apparently, this is not the first time that Matthew LeGrant has strayed from the law on this issue. And I think that we need to take a look at the systemic issue of why would he consistently approve things that aren't appropriate. Later on this evening, after we address the issue, I'll brief Ms. Boback on it, and then maybe get to you for
right. Is that 1808 Ontario Place?
That's the one.
Okay. Yes, definitely. We have observed. Also, I have observed in my 6 years the autonomy of the zoning administrator and the impact that has had on various cases throughout the ward, and have been working very closely with some of the activists in Adams Morgan in particular and the experts on the impact that overall has, and really what does it mean to have a zoning code if it's, if the zoning administrator is straying from it significantly. So I'm happy to talk to you, Commissioner, or other impacted residents, in follow-up. And I look forward to hearing the outcome of your debate tonight as well.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bowles, I know you had a question you dropped in the chat. Is that something you want to do now? Want to go over that?
Yeah, if the council member is able to, I know that we will be getting updated financials from the CFO. And I just wanted to hear if there was anything that you knew about the expected outcome or what the process that looks like.
Good question. So we did get a report today from the CFO on the revenue estimates. It was not as bad as I thought. I guess that's probably the most positive way I can say it. What he said was in his letter, and this oversimplifies it a little bit, but what he said was that he thinks his April estimate can hold, and that we may be able to make it through for some time with that estimate, meaning we already had a $770 million revenue reduction, and he doesn't necessarily see further. He also said, if all the things that could go wrong do go wrong, we could have a $600 million revision downward, meaning we would have to cut $600 million worth of things. And I will remind you from my discussion earlier that council enhanced $63 million worth of things that would probably be the first thing to get cut. And that would be only the tip of the iceberg. So here's what I would say. If you're in a position to pay your taxes, please pay your taxes. If you're in a position to pay your rent, please pay your rent. Doing that allows us to support those who are not. And thus far, he was pleasantly surprised by how many people did pay their income taxes and property taxes. And the next big thing is the October property tax bill. We saw a lot of people were totally on time and paid their property taxes in March, and some of that may have been related to the fact that a lot of us pay into escrow, and so that money was already taken out by our banks. That may not be the case in the fall. And so those are the things that we really monitor. Property tax is probably the biggest revenue generator for us, and the thing we rely on most consistently. There was also real estate taxes. There was a little bit more of that than he thought there would be. People are still buying homes, probably because interest rates have gone way down. So it's a mixed bag, but right now we're holding. So we just need everybody to keep their fingers crossed, and hopefully we'll be able to execute these programs that we very carefully curated into the FY21 budget to help others. First and foremost in my mind is the rental assistance program. And, obviously if Congress acts and makes us whole with the CARES Act, with the $700 million that we did not get, that other states got, that will go a long way. And, you know, not to get overly political, but we could use some change in November at the federal level that I think would put us in a better position to serve our constituents fully throughout this public health emergency. So,
and also statehood.
statehood, right? I mean, right. But you know, I thought we were going to have the White House in both the House and the Senate back in 2016. So I try not to get too excited about polling. So,
and there's one other question about accountability for the event on Swan Street with MPD when we had 100+ people arrested. And do you see that question there?
Oh yes, I see that. I'm sorry, Annika. Yeah. So we've asked for an after action report on that and a review of the behavior, and we still have not gotten it, which you can imagine is frustrating to me. If you're frustrated, I'm probably even more frustrated because as a council member, I should be able to get that information. So Council Member Allen, who's the chair of the Judiciary Committee and the Ward 6 council member, has been really pushing on that. So we're trying to get it. But you know, we had a lot of firsthand accounts that were scary and upsetting and impacted a lot of Ward 1 residents. So it's something that I'm still focused on and trying to get answers on.
Any other questions from commissioners or residents for our council member?
Hey, council member Gordon Chaffin here. I just thank you for attending our meeting. I just wanted to ask, as a follow-up to that budget question Japer asked, you council members had a lot of conflict about transparency in the final resolution of the budget. And so maybe there's not a good answer right now, but if you guys have to do adjustments in the next few months to the new fiscal year, will you keep pushing for as much transparency as possible, I guess?
Yeah, you better believe it. I was really ticked off. I mean, that's a polite way of putting it. I've never been, I don't think I've ever been so angry on the dais as I was with this budget season. And frankly, it's just, there were so many things that were changed in the final reading of the budget that the public didn't have any time to weigh in on. I actually didn't get to see in advance. There were a select few council members that the chairman was talking to about the changes. And I say that not, you know, begrudgingly, but because, you know, I wasn't going to vote for it anyway. And that's probably why the chairman didn't include me in his negotiations. But if he was, basically what happened was the chairman raised a tax on the ad industry. The ad industry got upset and he said, okay, I will remove the tax, but it was an $18 million revenue generator. So he then he tabled the motion, adjourned the budget meeting, and brought us back 2 days later and said, I found $18 million, here are all the places. Ultimately, it led to, because of the way I had structured the human services budget, and I had found all of this recurring funding for programs that would have lasted us 4 years. He converted a lot of that to one-time money, meaning these programs would only be funded for a year at a time. So human services got $18.7 million worth of cuts through his finagling. And so a lot of what I was really proud of that I told you about tonight would have been funded for 4 or 5 years and now is only funded for 1, which means next year we have to do it again, which is exhausting and also creates instability and uncertainty among the people who depend on the programs. So yeah, I was pretty mad. And I think, you know, people who care about government transparency should be mad about that too. And, you know, the chairman of the council is elected by the entire city. So every single one of you voters should know that and should, if you're concerned, make sure that you let the chairman know about that. We shouldn't be budgeting that way. We should do it through a regular process with public hearings and input. So.
Okay, thank you, council member.
Thank you for so much time. I appreciate it.
Oh yeah, we always appreciate seeing you and for a thorough update. All right, so moving on to public announcements, please limit the announcements to 2 minutes per person, and you can raise your hand if you're on the phone by hitting *9 from the web interface. Just hit raise hand. So I'll give it, you know, some time for people to get to that. Nick, go ahead.
Hi, Nick with the Reed Cook Neighborhood Association. Just want to thank Michaela, Commissioner Wright, for all of her hard work on the commission and all the work she's done for the Neighborhood Association. She showed up to every one of our cleanups. She's definitely worked very hard for this neighborhood, and we're sorry to lose her, but we're wishing her the best of luck in Seattle. And next, we also want to thank the ANC for the grant that they awarded us at the last meeting. And thank you to the community for donating to the Reed Cook Relief Fund. With your help, we've been able to provide microgrants to almost 60 families. However, with the additional federal assistance going away, we anticipate many more applicants and can once again use the help of the neighborhood. Please, if you can, consider donating to the Reed Cook Neighborhood Association Relief Fund so we can help more folks in the neighborhood. To donate, please visit reedcook-dc.org. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Kristen?
Hi, it's Kristen Barden with the Adams Morgan Partnership. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I have a new mic, so it should be an improvement over my previous microphone. I want to also thank the ANC for the grant that they gave us back in June. We were able to install 4 hand sanitizer stations throughout the neighborhood. There's one in Unity Park, there's one in SunTrust Plaza, there's one in front of Jumbo Slice on 18th Street near the Big Belly trash can, and there's also one in front of Bank of America in the 1800 block of Columbia Road. So we're monitoring them carefully to make sure that there is hand sanitizer in them all the time. And so far so good. They seem to be well received and are being used. So that's great. And thank you again, ANC, for helping us do that. Also, I wanted to let folks know that we sent a letter on Monday to various DC government agencies and to the council member, encouraging them to continue the pilot program that pedestrianized 18th Street the last weekend in June. We're very disappointed that they chose not to continue that partnership, and so we're pushing them to continue to do that with us. And there is a working group that's formed to look at at rerouting the WMATA buses on the weekends to allow for that pedestrian zone, and we're hopeful that that process will move along fairly quickly. And we'll have some, that's one of the stumbling blocks to the weekend pedestrian zone. So we're hoping that that can be resolved and we can, implement that soon. But we need DC government to help us out. So that's, I think that's it for me. Thanks.
Thanks, Kristen. Okay. Any other public announcements? Hearing none, let's go on to the consent agenda. So there's our Q2 and Q3 quarterly financial report in there. Commissioner Bowles, do you want to lead that off?
Certainly. So if Michaela or Gordon was able to, oh yeah, here we go. Okay, so in the Google Drive, we have the quarterly financial report for the second quarter, as well as for the third quarter. And I will screen share so folks can take a look at these. So we passed the F2, or we passed the second quarterly financial report previously, but we needed to pass a revised report. Essentially, there was a category error, which essentially made a receipt for a district allotment when it should have been a disbursement for Mary Coogan. So I've made those changes, and I can give you a few more moments to look at that, or if anyone has any questions. I know this is a consent agenda, but I feel like we should take questions if anyone has anything, just because it's our finances. So, and it is virtual, and I am new to this. Well, I guess not now, but she's working as hard as she can on this. I'm definitely not the biggest finance person, so I'm learning a lot. So I apologize for the revised QFR.
Okay. Thanks for doing this, Commissioner Bowles. And just a quick question. So the checks and what's dispersed, we have a check for every amount that is dispersed, correct? We have a canceled check for every amount that is dispersed.
Correct, yes. Yeah, we either have a PDF, which that report is sent to the Office of ANC and the Office of Chief Financial Officer. And then we also have, you take a picture of any check that's been voided as well. So all of those are accounted for. We do, and then once a check clears, I inform the Office of ANC using a shared accounting document.
Okay. We have a matching bill or invoice when we write those checks. Is that right?
Yes, except we do. The exception does come with our FedEx account, and that discrepancy, essentially, I've been getting letters from them asking for payments, not invoices asking for payments. So the amount that they've been requesting of us has been differing from what I've been sending. We are in the process of obtaining the FedEx actual online access, so we can line up all of the invoices for FedEx. We would then be able to line up each check with every single invoice. But other than FedEx, yes, if there is an invoice, whether that be from Gordon, whether that be from Mary Center, or whether that be for like the Department of Employment Services for employing our administrative assistant, Mary Coogan, all of those things would have some sort of receipt or invoice.
Okay, good to hear. Comments from the rest of the commission or members of the audience? Okay, and how about Q3?
Correct, okay. Sorry. Okay. My apologies.
No.
It has taken a few moments. Okay, so I will say I think that this is this is the next quarter, and I think that this is something that we should be proud of, mostly because we spent $8,000 in grants, which is great, which says that, hey, we're doing a lot of stuff for the community. This actually is not the most updated one. Let me pull that out. The reason why this is not, and that just to share, is that that one included personnel and costs that also included our payment to Mary Center, and those things are separated out. And in that report that was just up, it is not. So let me try and get this one for us really quick. Okay, yeah, awesome. Okay. Again, apologies for the delay. Okay, So in this report, it will show our personnel, our direct office costs, and our office supplies. So the personnel cost, the reason why it is so high then is because that is when we also paid our CPA, Ken Waters, who helps me assemble these financial reports. He does most of the employment part of it. And then also for Mary Coogan. The direct office costs is for previous payment of Mary Center, which we tried to pay, but they never cashed the check. So we ensured that they actually got their full payment from last year. So we're totally caught up on Mary Center. And we signed another contract for their term during this quarter. And it essentially was to pay the remaining balance of what we didn't pay last year. And then up until we stopped meeting for COVID-19 purposes. And then we also have a letter attached that Amir is on, stating those types of things with a contract. I think those are the big items on in this quarter.
Okay.
And then the grants that we dispersed.
The 2 grants that Nick and Kristen had just commented on that we're doing.
Yeah.
For the community. So that's great. The only comment I'd say is the CPA costs. We should probably move those from personnel to purchase of service. Yeah, so personnel is like W-2 1099 folks, and that's more of a purchase of service.
Yeah, certainly. The reason why it was in personnel is just because that's how it has been previously categorized. I try to use like what we previously have done, but I think that makes perfect sense. Yeah, I mean, I think it makes perfect sense. So I can do a revised split out of the personnel for the purchase of service in that section. And then I guess this kind of goes out to, I sent an email, we'll be reviewing Gordon Chafin's contract over the month, and we'll be hopefully voting on either a revised or an approved contract. Would you want that to be in the purchase of service as well, or personnel?
That makes sense to me as a purchase of service, but we'll talk about that when that comes up.
Okay.
So that's just moving something around. The overall numbers don't change. Questions from other commissioners or members of the public? Okay, not hearing any. So thanks for doing this. I know that this is not the most exciting work, but it's part of the plumbing of how things do work, and we have a fiduciary duty. This is done correctly down to the penny. So I really appreciate you taking the time to do this all the time. Treasurer Bowles.
Yeah, thank you. Like I said, I'm definitely learning a lot, so it's a great opportunity. I'm always trying to learn, so here we go.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we also have the July meeting minutes on the consent agenda. So how the consent agenda works. I'll just say this really quick. If there's any objection, raise your hand. We'll pull it off the agenda. The point of the consent agenda is to not call 3 different votes right now for these 3 different items. We call one vote, vote them all out at once. It's to save time, not to ram anything through that is controversial. So having said that, and not hearing any objection, all those in favor of the consent of the 3 items on the consent agenda, please indicate so by saying aye.
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 Any against? Any abstentions? All right, good unanimous vote there. So moving to the regular agenda. So we'll start with the ABC and Public Safety Committee, a resolution that was discussed, actually, the topic was discussed at the committee but there was no resolution passed. So Commissioner Guthrie, do you want to take that?
Yeah. I circulated a proposed resolution among the commissioners earlier this week that is a proposal to protest the proposed transfer and substantial changes to provisions in the license that would be going to the MAHK meetings as the transferee. And the proposal is on our usual basis of adverse impact on peace, order, and quiet, but it also has the other statutory bases, impact on public safety and transportation, impact on value of property, and it has two additional portions to it that deal with the legal question of whether or not this particular license can be transferred inside the moratorium zone, because it has never actually operated as a license in the moratorium zone. It was in safekeeping during the period that the zone was expanded to include the property where the license previously was. But that license now has two separate licensees, so there's at least a legal question about it. And in addition, there's a provision of the transfer that requires the board to take into consideration the impact on residents. And we've got a residential building that immediately abuts the property that is being proposed as the transfer site. So the point of this is to get all of the issues laid down, put it into ABC as a protest notice, and then we'll go through the usual protest process, which includes determination of who the appropriate parties are to the protest, potential resolution by mediation process, potential resolution by further negotiations regarding potential settlement agreements with the licensee and the other protestants, and at a last resort, some sort of hearing in front of the alcohol beverage board to determine whether or not it is appropriate to allow this transfer under the conditions requested, including the changes to the license. So I would move the resolution and need a second.
Second. So that introduction.
If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them, but I think I laid it out. By the way, we didn't have a resolution coming out of committee because we didn't find out about this in sufficient time to give 10-day notice to the public that we were going to be considering that at the ABC meeting, which is, the week after the ANC meeting regularly. And since we didn't have time to get it out, what we did was we had pretty extensive discussion among the applicant's attorney, members of the general public, and particularly neighbors of the proposed location. So I think we had a pretty robust discussion of what concerns were, and we just didn't go forward with the resolution at that point in time.
Thank you, Commissioner Guthrie. I'd like to open it up to commissioners quickly for any questions or comments, and then I'll move to members of the public.
Yeah, I just have a question. With this resolution, I guess I have two things. First thing, with this resolution, in terms of like process, when would, like, ultimately we want a settlement agreement, or we just don't want this property to be developed in this type of way? And with this resolution, it leaves the door for both, correct?
Yeah, it really has the same procedure that we always have. The thing that's really up in the air at this point is that ABRA is just going to begin to have procedural events in September, it's my understanding. They have not even had roll call, which is the initial time that people get together to determine who are the active protestants. So they're just going to be beginning to roll that out in September. So we're not sure quite how things are going to work. I don't imagine that they will do Zoom hearings, but who knows? But it's the same general approach where there's a determination by ABRA of who are valid protestants, some sort of mediation process, followed by continuing negotiations up until such time as there is a hearing scheduled. So any of those times, it can come to the point where the protestants agree that the provisions of a proposed settlement agreement are sufficient to protect the interests that they were concerned about. And that's certainly the case in this case.
Okay. And so to my second part, I would like to see if you would accept a friendly to the resolution to strike the first bullet point, adverse effect on real property values. I will say, I just think timeliness of the whole situation, but I don't think that it would impact property values. I think that, being able to get a $75 haircut or a really expensive cocktail, probably isn't decreasing property values, but more so increasing. And I just can't really, I would look for a friendly to remove that. And then for the second and third bullet point, just to be replaced as the first and second bullet point as the main reasons for why we would be protesting.
My response would be that I could not accept that as a friendly. Generally, we don't include the property valuation issue or the impact on transportation and public safety, because in order to establish that at a hearing, you have to have some sort of expert testimony on the fact. It appears that there would at least potentially be some evidence of that if it ever came to hearing, which is the only time that it really makes any difference whether it's included or not at this point in time. And I think that there is very likely to be some sort of impact to the property that is immediately adjacent to this proposed location. I can't imagine that their property would be as attractive or appealing to someone as a private residence with the proposed activity directly, wall to wall next to them. So I think that there is a reasonable basis for it in this particular case. And I think that we should keep it in the resolution. It's one of those things that, as with a lot of legal stuff, at the end of the day, we may not use, but unless we assert it at this point in time, we're not allowed to bring it up later. So I think there is a factual basis that could be introduced as evidence at a potential hearing should we ever get to that point. But as always, we prefer not to get to that point. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And for another, so is there, I know that we've passed a few resolutions that have said something to the effect of we'll protest unless we have a settlement agreement. Is there a way that we could do something like that in this case? I know the applicant.
It would be totally superfluous. Every time we protest, we may say in the course of it that we are in current negotiations and it looks like we're going to be able to get to a settlement resolution within the next month or so. But anytime we protest, we can always end the protest by entering into a settlement agreement. You don't need to include that in the protest at all. It's
so
irrelevant.
what's hindering folks from entering into a settlement agreement?
Pardon me?
what is hindering people from entering?
We haven't even
into-
sat down with the applicant at this point, Jacob.
Okay.
Normally, the way we do this is that once the protest has been accepted by ABRA, and ABRA determines who the parties are, because in this case and in some other cases, there are neighbors that want to be group of however many they are. There can be abutting property owners. There can be citizens associations or community organizations that want to be included as protesters. Once ABRA has figured out who all those people are, then we can sit down and discuss terms of an appropriate settlement agreement. But until that point in time, it's difficult to negotiate when you don't know who all is part of the negotiations.
So it sounds like we just listed all of the folks that could be a part of the negotiations. And if I'm correct, the ANC ultimately is the ultimate negotiator, right? I mean, I feel like.
Well, practically the ANC generally takes a lead. Frequently the Citizens Association, particularly Calorama Citizens Association, is actively involved in it. But whenever there is a group of neighbors, the neighbors also frequently are very involved in it. So it's a process, it's a challenge. We do our best to move forward in a productive way that is dealing with everyone in a respectful and appropriate way. But these things do take time, and with this Corona situation and ABRA and how they're going to deal with it, it really is up in the air as to the time frame that we're talking about here.
If I may, I would also like to.
The spirit in there. I do want to say one thing, based on Commissioner Bowles' last comment about the ANC entering into a settlement agreement. A group of residents, 22 residents, including 11 residents that live next door in the apartment building next door, have already filed a protest with ABRA and with the ANC. If the ANC were to enter into a settlement agreement, we would do away with the protest of those residents. So we would trample on on the rights of those residents who have already filed a protest. So I do want to make sure that that point is out there for the commissioners and members of the public. So, excuse me, sorry to interrupt, Commissioner Dendy, but I wanted to get that out there. Go ahead.
So are you saying that is the language of that protest the same exact language that we have here in our resolution then?
I haven't gone through their language in detail. I think in relation to if the question is in relation to the property values, I'll say that it's the apartment building next. It's a
condo building.
It's a condo building. Sorry, next door, and there's condos that share a wall with the proposed establishment. So.
Okay, so I mean, I just wanted to echo what Jacob was saying about the property value situation. I would agree that we don't need it, and I think, I mean, like, property value comes up a lot in these situations. I think it doesn't really make sense because in this area, the real value is the land. The land is obviously very valuable. It's going to go up in time. It has gone up in time. The establishment, to me, is like not going to really adversely affect the property value of the condos because it's already a good location and the land is going to appreciate in value. I mean, what's concerning to me is the, let me go back to it, the second 2 points, which, oh my God, now I lost it. But anyway, the, disturbing, people's lifestyle and, pedestrian safety and all that stuff that's in the second and third point. The property value, I think, is just irrelevant. I mean, if it's, I would rather hear from the neighbors about this, but I mean, my position is the same as Japer's. I don't think it's relevant and I don't think we need to bring it up. And I also I'm not sure that that's how property value works. So I think it's really based on land and location rather than a tavern being in a row house. So.
Well, respectfully, the issue is relevant in that it is one of the statutory bases to object to a particular transfer or new license or whatever. It's within the regulation, the statutes and the regulations that provides that it is in fact relevant, assuming you have evidence of it. Now, as someone who has conducted these hearings, if we've got a basis that we don't have an evidentiary basis for, then we don't go forward with that particular basis. But at this point in time, the indications that I've had from the adjacent owners is that they believe that their property values in fact will go down if there is a tavern that is relocated directly next to their units. And I think that that's a legitimate point that can be raised. And as I say, there's a difference between what you plead essentially and what actually gets done at any hearing. There's also a difference between what you plead and what winds up being in a settlement agreement. If we were to take that out, that would just take away one of the potential arguments that we would have. And from a legal perspective, that makes no sense at this point in time.
And I'll also add that if 11 residents in the condo building next door believe that it's going to affect their property values, who are we to say that it isn't? So I think I'll also say that we do expect to engage with the applicant and the neighbors in order to reach a settlement agreement. And this will help us have a seat. Well, it will enable us to have a seat at the table and also enable the neighbors that have already filed a protest to have a seat at the table so that we can enter into a settlement agreement. So other questions from commissioners before we move over to members of the public? Okay, we'll start at the top of the queue, and that's Lori Clark.
Amir, in the interest of efficiency, would it be possible to have somebody from the Carswell speak first and then to go after them?
Sure, of course. So I think we have Piper Hendricks. I think she's in the Carswell. Hold on.
Yeah, I am here. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Great. I'm actually, okay, great. I am one of the abutting neighbors. I share a wall. And at this point, I think, I really appreciate the thoughtfulness that everybody's putting into this. I completely agree that keeping everything on the table right now makes sense, and we'll determine later what, where we actually move forward on which points are most relevant. But that, I think, having the seat at the table, having this conversation is really important. And I know that we're all eager to get to a resolution, and there's a lot of extra patience that we have to have right now in all the delays with the pandemic. But just really appreciate everybody's thoughtfulness and keeping that seat and our voices heard.
Thanks, Piper. Let's keep going down the list. Lee Farmer. Lee? Okay, Lee Farmer. All right, let's keep moving. And we'll go up to Lori Clark. We'll come back to Lee Farmer.
Okay, great. Is by any chance Lee Carter available to speak? Because we sort of have an order that we think would keep it moving and keep it efficient.
Well, I don't see her hand up. There we go. Okay. Lee Carter, go ahead.
Hi, a little bit on the spot here. representing the Carswell. But we have, you know, I mean, we expressed some of these points in the last meeting of the ANC. All this is new to me, so thank you for your patience, and I really thank everyone for your service. We are concerned about noise coming from both inside and outside the proposed establishment. We do share a common wall and directly overlook 1806 Vernon and 1807 Florida. We have health, privacy, and other issues about people whose windows overlook the cafe area proposed on the Florida Avenue side. I mean, just thinking that people might be leaving the establishment to go smoke outside or whatever. We have concerns about the ability of you know, to the property value to resell our homes. Yeah, and we have questions about the ability, especially around trash, in an extremely limited space for not just a tavern, but also a cafe, a hair salon, a retail shop, an office, an apartment, and all of that. That's a lot of, I mean, you know, we're always trying to manage our trash here in the Carswell. So we know that's a lot of trash that could be produced on a daily basis. And we already have, you know, extreme rat problems and so forth on our street. There's no room on Vernon Street for deliveries. Vernon Street has always been kind of a quiet one-way street. So we're worried about that. We're worried about people congregating on Florida Avenue. You know, we have a lot of concerns.
Well, thank you, Lee. Let's.
From the Carswell can speak to it, but I'd say trash and noise and those kinds of concerns are our concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Lee Farmer, if you're ready, go right ahead.
You hear me this time?
Yes, we sure can.
Excellent. I had to switch to my headset. I was like, what's happening? I actually feel like at this point, everyone's pretty much covered it. I think the main point, I think we appreciate kind of keeping everything on the table right now in terms of the reasons for protesting. I would say that we generally do think that there is a property value argument to make, particularly to the extent to which if you end up having existing, you know, people decide to start selling their places because they don't want to live next to a bar, we tend to have a pretty low turnover in the Carswell. And so if we start to have, you know, more of that, I think that you would start to see an effect on the property values. But I'm not necessarily the expert on that, but I do think that that's worth keeping on there and working through. But yeah, I just appreciate kind of the protest and getting us all to the table so we can start talking to each other.
Got it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Lee. Lori Clark, go right ahead.
Thank you. I want to give you a little background information and context. 1806 Vernon Street is a business with a proposed tavern with proposed late night hours within the block of Vernon Street that faces onto Vernon Street, and it's not on the end of the block, so it doesn't face either onto 18th Street or 19th Street. Vernon Street is a one block, one way, one traffic lane, primarily residential street. The businesses that currently exist on Vernon Street are businesses that have traditional 9 to 5, slightly plus hours, a hair salon, a wellness massage place, And the restaurants that surround Vernon Street, primarily on 18th Street, do not have the very late hours generally. So this would be a big change for the Vernon Street area. And it would have an impact on Vernon Street. And one of the questions being about property value, a factor in property value is the factor of nuisance properties. And I'm not saying this is a nuisance property, but at this point we haven't worked out all the details. And if it were or were to become a nuisance property, it could affect property values. I live at 1813 Vernon Street, which is directly across from 1806 Vernon Street. The numbers are a little deceiving. My front door looks directly into the front door of 1806 Vernon Street. My bedroom windows look directly into the second floor of 1806 Vernon Street, and I can actually see right through to it, to the back windows in the building that look out onto Florida Avenue. So what does happen at 1806 will have an impact on me, my basement apartment tenants, and other residents of Vernon Street, including the residents of the Carswell. Okay. The issues have pretty much been talked about, the trash and the noise, and they will impact beyond the Carswell to other residents of Vernon Street.
Well, thank you, Lori. Yeah, those points are well taken. So to keep going down the list, we have quite a few hands up, so I'm going to try to be cognizant of time here. So Peter Wood, go ahead.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, I'll try to be quick too, but just kind of to offer a bit of support for what I think Commissioners Bowles and Dendy are saying, specifically on that first bullet point. And I don't want to over harp on this because I know it's a consuming thing, but I mean, I just get concerned when we see wording like this regarding future property value, because it's often weaponized to hurt people. Not accusing anyone of doing that, that's unlikely, but it just has that kind of same tone to it. And I mean, the important issues which were brought up, which are very valid, and I say that as someone who used to live next to a locksmith, so I know what it's like to live next to a noisy place. Keys are loud. But noise, hours of operation, public space use, especially in this pandemic, that's really important to be mindful of. But I think that if not eliminating that first bullet point, even maybe offering the distinction between evidence for loss of future property value and speculation that property value could fall is an important distinction to make. Maybe it's just kind of looking into it too far, but I think that distinction is something that's worth looking at, especially because we see that's something that's worth kind of directing the future business owners or the future license holders, I should say, to maybe even other properties in the area, because we see that it's an issue that does affect property value, which is the failure to retain properties on 18th Street and otherwise. Like I said, an interesting spot to have it. I don't live on Vernon Street, but it is a few houses in. So that I think this is an important discussion that could be really fruitful. But yeah, just offering support for what a couple of commissioners were saying. And then also for the others, I think a couple others were saying, you know, this is a hard discussion to have. And it's nice to see people doing so in good faith.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Can you tell me that the distinction that you were just talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it was, if I'm not mistaken, Commissioner Guthrie who was saying that there's some sort of evidence that, I don't know exactly what that would entail, but some sort of evidence from an expert that property value would go down, which of course is possible, but I mean, any sort of economic speculation at the micro level, let alone the macro level, you know, it's speculative. So I think I specifically said evidence for loss of value is not the same as speculation that value could potentially fall. Not trying to go too far into like minute details, but I think that those are two important and separate categories.
Thanks for the comment there and your support for what was said previously, yeah, Commissioner Dundee and Bowles. The distinction I think Commissioner Guthrie was saying was that evidence would have to be presented at a hearing. So yeah, but thank you for that. And moving on to phone number ending in 595. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. It's Matt Wexler. I'm lurking on the phone here. Is this the infusion license, or is this another license associated with 1723?
No,
this is the old Chief Ike license.
So this is the old chief. And do we know what ever happened with the infusion license?
It's there, and I don't believe they've actually started operating, but they have a valid license to do so at that address.
Okay, and presumably both of these two licenses are in safekeeping.
I don't believe that the infusion is in safekeeping. I think it's supposed to be an active license. It's just that they aren't open yet.
Got it. Okay. All right. Figured I would ask as someone involved in the infusion settlement.
Okay. Right. I do recall you were involved in that. Thanks for doing that. That was helpful at the time, but now they haven't opened. So, hey. Well, thanks, Matt.
Yep.
Okay. We have Andrew Klein on behalf of the applicant.
Thank you. Thank you for hearing us tonight. I'll be very brief. We certainly have heard your concerns, heard the concerns at the committee meeting, and the only thing I want to say is that we certainly look forward to working with you to see if we can get this resolved. Our client has already taken steps to address some of the concerns and will continue to do so. I look forward to you appointing a representative with whom we could work to try to further refine approaches to addressing the issues that have been raised.
Thanks, Andrew. We appreciate that, and also the willingness to work with us. Mr. James.
Good evening, everyone. I wanted to offer a suggested slight amendment to the wording, because though the resolution says all the right things, it doesn't identify the license. So I just think that in the first sentence, you should say ANC 1C protests the application for transfer of retailers Class C tavern license number ABRA 116881.
I'm fine with adding that as a friendly, Dennis.
Thank you. I didn't realize I had such ANC powers. So thank you for doing that. But I do have a little further information I'd like to share with everyone who's the commissioners and who else is listening on the call or on the Zoom. That is that the effect on property values is one of the 4 protest grounds. And if some protestants use it for their protest purposes, like let's say all the individuals who live on Vernon Street claim it, and let's say the Calorama citizens also claims it, because I feel quite sure that we're going to protest. But the ANC doesn't use the real property values one. That means that in the discussion that might take place at a protest hearing, which none of us want to go to, and hopefully it won't come to that, but you never know. That means that the ANC couldn't talk about the property value, even though it might have something valid to say. It would be just simply the residents plus maybe the KCA, in case you probably need to hire an expert to get the board, ABC board, to pay attention to that point. And, it might be enough that the residents of the Carswell and others think it's worth doing. And you just don't want to close off any avenues to a difficult situation like this and trying to come out with the best possible arrangements for the community. So I think that's what I wanted to say. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Dennis. Your point's taken. Going on to Ted Gafarian. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing the name.
You pronounced it correctly. Thank you so much. So I'm a Carswell resident. I'm an owner in apartment 41 of the Carswell, and I just wanted to follow up on just some comments and just to challenge some things that have been said. So first off, this tavern would be open fairly late, or the hours that it's applied for are fairly late. And so I purposefully chose to live in the Carswell because it's off 18th Street on what Lori Clark said was a pretty quiet street. And the windows that are on the Carswell that face the property in question that we share a party wall with are fairly large. They're 10 feet across. They're sliding doors. So we are extremely concerned about noise. And we know that not only are we concerned that any prospective buyers for this property or any properties we choose to sell would be extremely concerned about late night noise at 2 or 3 in the morning, especially because, and not just noise, but also privacy, because these windows peer directly into living rooms. And there are windows and outdoor spaces that the developer for this space wants to use for patron seating and for the bar/restaurant. So a number of us in the Carswell are extremely concerned about this and about noise and privacy because these are our residences. And just wanted to reiterate what Lori said about the fact that a lot of us in the Carswell are extremely concerned about having a bar immediately next door and sharing a party wall with some of our residents. We have long-standing residents in the Carswell, some of whom have been here longer than 25 years. Some of whom are older residents, and they've also expressed concerns to us in the building about noise and privacy and about a tavern being open next door. Thank you.
Thanks, Ted. They're important points, so thanks for joining and speaking up about them. Annika.
Yes, thank you. Also a resident of the Carswell and an owner. Have been here over a decade myself. And as Ted stated, we have, I think one of the anchors of the Carswell is that we have owners, about a third of the building, who have been here for decades. That helps with the sellability. People are able to apply for FHA loans, entry-level buyers, because of the proportion of owners in the building compared to renters, and because of the stability of ownership in the building. So when we talk about value, it's not just price, it's sellability, the ability to sell. I'll repeat what many others have, just an echo what others have said about the noise. The outdoor space, the intent to program it with potentially live music and a beer garden. We can hear those conversations. I'm on the second level, which, although it's second from the Vernon Street side, our unit faces the Florida Avenue side, and it's therefore on the third level here on the back of the building. We can hear loud conversations very clearly with our windows closed. If you multiply the number of people out there who are enjoying a beverage, having a smoke, it's going to be a nuisance to everyone in the building facing the south side of the building, which is half of our units. Half of the year, we typically are able to leave our windows open and turn off our air conditioning and enjoy fresh air. But if there's a beer garden out there and people are smoking, we'll no longer be able to do that. And so having programmed area for this function basically is disruptive to that. As I mentioned, I think in the chat box, several or multiple of our residents have been here for many decades. They had the intent to age in place here. And if they're forced out by the transformation of this to a bar with both the indoor and the outdoor noise till late hours, 2 a.m., I have concern about where they'll relocate and how they'll be able to do that. We know that even though property values may have increased since they arrived here, everything else has increased as well. There's not a lot of affordable places to go, particularly if people are on fixed incomes. And I hate to think that we're forcing people out of their homes at a retirement age. And so I think that the thing about a speakeasy is that you're not supposed to know it's there, but everything about what we've heard so far about this application, it's going to be quite apparent what's going on next door, and we are very concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, Annika. Your points and the concerns of noise and property values are taken and heard. Thank you. So let's keep going here. We have a couple more hands. Marcus Mira.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we sure can. Please go ahead.
Wonderful. All right, so I live directly across from the proposed tavern at 1811 Vernon Street. And as everyone before me, residents along the street have stated, this is a very residential street. It's a quiet street at the point where we are. And I do have fears of how this will, everything that was proposed, the activities that were proposed leading into the evening, the bar, and having the exit of the bar through the door on Vernon Street, which would cause for people to loiter, linger, waiting for Ubers or their rides. And we all can be realistic and know how it is when we leave an establishment like this, and we wait for a ride. The voices are up if we've had drinks. I mean, the project sounds like a great establishment. It's just, I don't think everything that's included in the proposal is appropriate for a residential street. It would definitely affect all of those around. Voices and the number of people coming out of there at those late hours. My patio, my front door, my windows all face directly to that proposed establishment. And so I'm basically very worried about my lifestyle, my peace and rest, and also how that would factor in if I did want to leave that property and sell, and who else would consider that as a nuisance and not as an advantage to have a bar just across the street.
Okay, thanks, Marcus. The next person, Hart Sam.
Yeah, sorry, I haven't changed my name. My actual name is Sam Hart.
Okay.
And I live with Kylie Heemstra, another protester there, or person, I don't know what we would call ourselves. But we are renters of the Carswell. And we just kind of want to echo what Annika and Ted have said about the noise. We're on the 4th floor and our bedroom faces Florida, and we hear everything from it. And so just with more people, we would hear even more and more. And our specific concern is about those late hours. We are both teachers who wake up super early. And so that would kind of impact our lives fairly majorly. And then we, as I said, we're renters, and, realistically, we would probably move, and we wouldn't try and buy in a building that was next to a bar. So that kind of goes to the points of viability. And I know this is more anecdotal, or sellability, excuse me, and the price decreasing. And I know this is more anecdotal than an expert, but I just kind of wanted to share our perspective of that.
Well, thanks, Sam. Appreciate you hopping on the call and chiming in.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Alan Roth.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. There's an old adage that says everything that can be said has been said, except not everybody has said it. I'm not going to repeat everything that's been said. I think the commissioners have heard from almost all of the immediately affected neighbors next door in the Carswell and directly across the street from Lori and Marcus. There are several other protestants on the letter that you referenced to live up the street, including myself. And perhaps those of us who live a little further up the street would not suffer the most immediate impacts that you've heard from the folks who've already spoken. But I think one point that Lori made, I do want to reiterate, because I do think it impacts all of the folks on Vernon Street, including people who live further up the block, which is that our street has long been a quiet one-way residential street, largely spared from the 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. closing time rowdiness suffered by residents of the side streets further up 18th. The establishments on Lower 18th Street are all restaurants that mostly have much earlier closing times. When Mr. Hughes showed drawings at the ABC committee meeting earlier, I guess it was last month, suggesting that Florida Avenue is the primary entrance and exit to his establishment. I think the commissioners should be aware that at the time, we were under the impression that 1807 Florida Avenue was the primary entrance and exit to and from the establishment. We've now seen what's called a corrected placard showing the establishment's address as 1806 Vernon Street, which again gets us back to the question of how the Vernon Street doors on both the basement and ground floor will be used, and raising again the question of will our street that again has for years largely been spared the 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. closing time rowdiness going to be affected by people spilling out onto Vernon Street at 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. in the morning from this establishment? And that was a real open question that really never got addressed in our discussions last month. So again, this is yet another issue that remains to be resolved. And so again, we appreciate the time you all have taken and hope that you will move forward with this protest resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, former Chair Roth. And so we have one more hand raised, and we're going to take this back to commissioners. Lee Carter, go ahead.
But my husband, Andrew, who wants to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, this is Andrew Schumann. I am one of those older residents, 68 years old, and who's been here at 1812 Vernon Street for 23 years, I believe. And when we came here, we very specifically chose a quiet street and a quiet building. There had never been a bar, to my knowledge, on Vernon Street or on this back end of Florida Avenue. And you have to understand, in our building, there are units where your front part of your living room, our one room, our kind of one big room, fronts on Vernon Street, but our bedroom fronts on Florida Avenue. So we potentially will get this noise from both ends. And I have nothing against bars at all. I was a bartender for a long time in DC at the Child Herald and DC Space down at 7th and E. I spent far more than my fair share of time in bars. I just think it's very clear that that bars are on 18th Street and on Florida Avenue. 18th Street and Columbia Road, and not on Vernon Street or some side street. And that we are going to have and I'll wrap it up right now, we are going to have a big problem with delivery vehicles and trash vehicles on a very narrow, quiet street, or at a position on Florida Avenue that is right at 18th Street, which doesn't leave much room for delivery and trash vehicles. So I think it's just not a good location for this use. Thanks again for your consideration of all of this and for everyone's very considered comments.
Thank you. Thank you. Lori, you have a quick comment?
No, I had lowered my hand. I think all the points have been made.
Great, great. Okay. All right. We have one more person, Cassie. Cassie? Cassie, you're on if you have something to say. Your mic is unmuted. Okay. We have a couple questions from commissioners, and Commissioner Wright, go ahead, you were first.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. So if the ANC does not protest, then we do not get a seat at the table during the settlement agreement negotiations. Only the other protestants, the neighbors, KCA, if they decide to, get to be involved in that. Is that right? Or any eventual hearing?
That's correct. And well, if we do not protest, then the residents, the 22 residents, the only ones that, if we enter into a settlement agreement, I'm sorry, if we enter, if we do not protest and we enter into a settlement agreement, then the people who have already protested, remember 22 residents on Vernon Street who have already protested, we would wipe them out. So
okay. And is Dennis James correct in that if we do not include the property values bullet point, then we also can't bring that up or be involved in any conversations that might come up in a hearing that the other protestants bring up?
Correct, because we wouldn't be protesting on that point.
So I think what my position on this is, I'm excited to see a bar or, tavern, whatever is going in there. I think especially during this time when small businesses are struggling so much, the area needs more businesses. And I want the ANC to be involved in any sort of conversations that are going forward. So I think it's important to protest and involve ourselves as much as we can as the representatives of the neighborhood.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel the same way. Commissioner Bowles?
Yeah, so I guess to help clarify things with some of the other commissioners. So based on conversations that I've had with Abra, that essentially if we do sign into a settlement agreement, the neighbors wouldn't, their protests would be wiped out. But at this very point, the ANC wants the neighbors to voice, their concerns and craft a settlement agreement. My concern is if we don't add something to our resolution stating that the ANC wants to craft a settlement agreement and make sure that we are good faith actors, that people who are also protesting this, as I mentioned earlier, there's two routes. One route that pressures people into getting a settlement agreement and have community-based solutions. And then there's another route that's allowing people to completely get rid of this business. If you want this business to succeed, if you want this business to even happen in Adams Morgan, then that's one thing. And for it to not happen entirely, which sounds like a lot of folks are saying they're using parking or noise or trash, which are all things that this ANC historically has addressed in settlement agreements, including the KCA, including the RCNA. All of those things are addressed in settlement agreements, folks. They can use that as a route to push this building and to push this development. Who is investing in Adams Morgan right now? Who's investing in anything right now? And then on top of that, we're going to have a Black owned business who has an amazing idea, innovative, come into our space. And we're just going to continually go through hurdles and hurdles. When we talk about breaking systemic racism, this is a way. He's had to hire one of the best ABC attorneys so we could deal with folks that live on Vernon Street, so we can deal with KCA. It's ridiculous. We want to encourage Black business owners in Adams Morgan to be able to thrive. And I think there's audacity of saying that it would decrease the property value when he's pumping in 7 figures into this redevelopment. And then looking at the space right next to it, yes, he is willing to do so many things to make sure that the sound, to hire a sound technician, that's on the table. He wants that. For trash, he wants that. He is in a spot where he wants to have business. Why would he want to create an atmosphere for customers not to want to come in? He wants neighbors on Vernon Street to shop and drink at his coffee shop. He's not trying to piss you folks off. And what I hear is, I know there's some folks in that building that do want a settlement agreement. And I know that there's some folks in Vernon Street that do too, but there's also people that just don't want this business here entirely. And I think that is just wrong. I think it's wrong. And for us to continually push this and not allow a person who has gone through the legal hurdles of getting a tavern license, which is a whole nother effed up conversation about racism and elitism and having money and already having the moneyed interest to just continue with the money interest. Matt Wexler joined on the call because he's a part of those types of agreements. Moneyed interest, talking about moneyed interest. I think that this is a really good opportunity here for us to get rid of the first bullet point to talk about property values and for us to say, look, neighbors, this is going to come here. This is a great opportunity. He wants to be a good partner. I know you want to be a good partner here as well. Let's ensure that the noise is taken care of. Let's ensure that the trash is taken care of. Let's ensure that the traffic is taken care of, because those are things that KCA and RCNA and ANC 1C have done for decades. Settlement agreements, it's easy to see all of them. We want to do one that's very similar to what we've done previously. So that's my 2 cents. I think that we should be able to get this done. And I would encourage that, the other commissioners that look at this, we need to pressure people to come to the table. And it's through a settlement agreement. If you don't want this business to come in, then don't add the extra language to pressure folks to come to a settlement agreement, because that's what's going to happen.
So, okay.
Respectfully.
I just want to say one thing.
Commissioner Bowles, I just find it reprehensible for you to suggest that people are acting with bad motives in this particular case, and that we are not going to do everything we can to come to a reasonable solution if such can be affected.
But we could have already done this. I've already sent over a draft settlement.
I know you sent over a draft. You sent it over a draft that was incredibly ill-informed and ill-equipped to deal with the particular issues that need to be enforceable by the residents. Had you been involved in the ABC process at any point in time during the last 2 years, you would have recognized that this is something that gets done in consultation, excuse me, I'm speaking right now, in consultation with the applicant and with other protesters. You sent out a draft that, so far as I'm aware, came from your head and your head alone. That's not the way these things happen. And I find it very offensive for you to be stepping in and providing a grand solution where you don't know what the operative facts are, you don't know how to affect them. And quite frankly, Commissioner Irani has been the point person and the lead person on this. And so far as I'm aware, you didn't even consult him before you shot that proposed settlement agreement out. I found that very offensive from a procedural point of view. I find your actions and what you've been saying at this full meeting to be offensive to me personally and to a number of other people in the community. And I would ask you to temper your comments, please.
So
it's something that we can deal with in the regular course.
And I'll just say that we want to enter into a settlement agreement. This protest will allow us to have a seat at the table in order to enter into a settlement agreement. If we don't protest, as you know, we only meet once a month. So it's the protest deadline would expire. This would, if we don't protest tonight, we would not have the option of possibly protesting, which would make our negotiation at a settlement agreement quite toothless. So we can vote to protest tonight and send in the protest at a later date, which is kind of what I'm hearing from what you're saying, so that we have time to enter in to negotiations with the applicant. How does that sound?
I would like for you to also correct the record that you sent me over draft resolutions after I asked and inquired why this applicant wasn't getting into settlement agreement negotiations. You're completely correct, Ted. There have been backdoor negotiations on all of these settlement agreements that as an ABC committee member, I haven't been prompted to. Even the ones that are in my single member district, which is the entire eastern side of 18th Street. So, and not only that, RCA also hasn't been brought to the table with a lot of these. So, I mean, if we want to talk about process, yeah.
What I was told since the coronavirus was that RCNA was not interested in being party to settlement agreements, was not interested in doing any protests during the time of the coronavirus. And you were repeatedly invited to participate in negotiations and in hearings regarding applicants that came up during the course of your term, and you chose not to go to any of those.
It's the same type of stuff that you've been doing. I'm on the committee. I should be able to negotiate settlement agreements just like everyone else and submit it to the committee members, which I did. It's my first settlement agreement, and I asked Amir for advice. All of this is from previous settlement agreements that you have already negotiated out. Like, the thought that I'm not allowed to introduce a settlement agreement, like, really irritates me, especially considering where my single member district is.
So let's keep it germane to the protest resolution at hand. And Commissioner Bowles, the settlement agreement that you've drafted can be our starting point in the negotiations. But if we don't protest tonight, then any potential ANC participation in the settlement agreement will be quite difficult.
I feel you guys are conflating what I'm saying. I want us to protest unless we come into a settlement agreement.
Right, okay.
And I don't want us to protest because we have a settlement agreement. Why would we need to protest? We have a community-based agreement.
Okay, so I mean, I guess like from my perspective, you know, I did agree on the first bullet point of the property values, you know, maybe striking that. However, I also support the protesting, and I have heard from residents about this. And I understand that the point of view that they're coming from is that this is going to be like a really noisy establishment connected to walls that are people who have been here in the community for a very long time. And I want to support folks in their, you know, efforts to try to keep the noise level down. And, you know, I could understand their situation. I want to support this resolution because I don't live there, and the people who are living there are going to be affected by the business. And you know, where I live, like, I feel really happy. It's a very quiet area. I'm kind of like in a little nook. And so I think I would also be upset by, like, you know, loud taverns being, you know, shared walls next to me. And so I understand the folks who are upset about it. Jaybird, I mean, I know where you're coming from, but I do support I support the residents because they are the ones that live there and they're the ones that are going to be affected. I'm frankly not going to be affected. So, you know, I want to support the resolution, and I think we should just vote on it.
More businesses in your ANC affects you and everybody and all of the entire community.
I mean, I know that you're talking about big picture things. I'm just talking about, like, right now, folks don't even want the tavern. So if we're gonna have a settlement agreement, like that's already, anyway, I think we should vote on this. And yes.
So, thank you, Commissioner Dundee, for your comments. Thank you, Commissioner Bowles, Commissioner Guthrie.
Can I make 2 motions, please?
Sure, of course.
I'd like to make first motion to remove the first bullet point from this resolution.
So is there a second for that? Okay, sounds like the motion does not, it dies because it's not seconded. So was there a second motion, Commissioner Bowles?
No, if that motion didn't go, then the second one won't either. So.
Okay. Any other comments from commissioners? All right, let's call to a vote. All those in favor of the resolution protesting the application, the ABC application of mock meetings, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any against?
Nay.
You're against, Commissioner Bowles? Okay. Any abstentions? All right, 6-1 to 0. Okay, and thank you to all the residents who took time out of their evening to call in and or join the Zoom for their comments. So moving on to the next item on our agenda. It's from the PZT Committee, the Planning, Zoning, and Transportation Committee. We have a resolution to oppose and appeal a ruling related to development at 1808 Ontario Place Northwest. Commissioner Zatoli, would you like to lead this one off?
Thank you, Chair. I think I'd like to start with recognizing all of the time and effort that Lanier Heights residents put into efforts to better manage development in their community. And that resulted in a zoning change, which I think we should honor. And the decision by the zoning administrator to allow undue height, an extra story in a building in that Lanier Heights area is something that we need to oppose. Former Commissioner Gambrell is here and has much more of the technical information. There are many residents direly affected by these proposed building changes, and I think we ought to let them speak now.
Thank you, Commissioner Zatoli. We have a hand up. It's Kathleen, and then we'll get to Commissioner Gambrell as well, former Commissioner Gambrell.
Great. Am I unmuted? Great. Thank you so much. My name is Kathy Gilly, and I'm here representing the residents of a small cooperative building located at the corner of Ontario Road and Ontario Place. And I do want to start by thanking the commissioners who are members of the PZT committee for their unanimous support for the resolution to appeal the permit for construction at 1808 Ontario Place Northwest. I also want to thank Commissioner Zatoli especially for his support today and for raising this with our council member Nadeau. We're here to request your support for this appeal because the permit for the construction allows a very blatant violation of the RF1 zoning regulations. As has been said, this has to do with the height restriction and the limit on the number of stories that would be allowed in an RF1 zone. Since the PZT committee met, the permit for the development at 1808 Ontario Place actually has been issued. It was issued on July 29th, and we now have 60 days to appeal to the BZA. We on Ontario Road live directly adjacent to the property being developed. So we're concerned not only for the impact of this improper zoning permit on our property, it especially affects us because an entire side of our building overlooks the length of 1808 Ontario Place. But we're also concerned about the overall implications for the larger neighborhood if this development is allowed to circumvent the RF1 zoning regulations that so many people in this community fought so hard to enact a few years ago. I just want to quickly give you some background on the steps we've taken, both with the developer and the city, to address the issue. So when we first learned about this proposed development in February, we communicated our concerns that the plans appeared in violation of the zoning regulation to the developer. We hired an experienced architect to help us understand the technicalities. We met with the zoning administrator in person in early March to explain our specific objections. We clearly delineated these violations in April when we filed our response to the neighborhood notification letter concerning the property. And we have been proactive in making sure that you, our ANC commissioners, are fully aware of our concerns. We were prepared to make our case at the beginning of July in your July 1st meeting. We did testify at the PZT meeting on July 15th, and we're very grateful for the commissioner's support for the resolution at that time. And we're here now asking for your the full ANC support to appeal the permit. Let me briefly describe the basic substance of the case in general terms. The original plans the developer actually had two very serious zoning violations. One was related to something called the rear yard setback. And the second is the one we're talking about today, which was related to height and the number of stories. In response to our objections, the zoning administrator did require the developer to adjust the design to meet zoning requirements for the rear yard setback, and we believe that issue is resolved. But when it came to considering the height and number of stories of the building, the zoning administrator has allowed the building height to be measured improperly. As a result, the permit authorizes the construction of a 41-foot tall, 4-story building. The zoning regulations clearly state that the allowable height of a building in an RF1 zone should not exceed 35 feet and 3 stories. So this is coming about because the developer is not taking the building height measurement at the proper place. In fact, a communication we received from the zoning administrator himself acknowledges that the design, and I'll quote this, may not meet the current zoning regulations standards for measurement, end of quote. Yet he was going to allow the permit to proceed anyway. And again, as a result, this allows the permit will allow construction of an illegal 4th story and a building that is larger, in fact, is 6 feet higher than should be allowed. If this permit is allowed to stand, it would be a disturbing outcome not only for us who live next door and the other neighboring properties, but also for the whole community of Lanier Heights, who led a multi-year effort to win the RF1 zoning status. We are looking forward to having new neighbors next door and a new building on this property that will enhance the neighborhood. But we really will insist that the building respect the zoning regulations that so many people have fought for. I would now like to turn it over to Alan Gambrell, who I'm sure many of you know has a great deal of experience working with these matters, and he can help clarify some of the specific zoning violations that we plan to appeal. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Kathy. Former Commissioner Gambrell, go ahead.
Thank you, Commissioner. And Kathleen, once again, you hit it out of the ballpark. You're wonderful to follow. Commissioners, what I'm about to summarize is in the resolution that you have before you, but I'm going to try to simplify it a little bit because the nature of zoning regulations has a certain amount of complexity. The key point is as follows. The zoning administrator is measuring the building height at the wrong place by not measuring at the building facade. The regulations require this. Instead, the zoning administrator is measuring at a point at least 7 feet away from the building facade. Now, one might ask, is there a reason that the zoning administrator is not measuring at the building facade? Perhaps. There are rules that provide what are called exceptions to grade. What that means is there's an exception to where you measure. Among those exceptions is to not measure within an excavated area in front of the building if that area is less than 5 feet in width from the building. At 1808 Ontario Place, there is an excavated area. It is not less than 5 feet in width. It is, in fact, 7 feet in width from the building. Thus, according to the rules, you should measure in that excavated area. But the zoning administrator does not wish to do that. So those are the rules. Let me read to you the zoning administrator's rationale for this decision, which he wrote to the neighbors. Although the existing areaway may not meet the current zoning regulation standard for measurements, it is clearly an areaway and can be considered as an existing non-conforming feature. Now let me break this down a little bit. The first part. Although the existing areaway may not meet the current zoning regulation standards for measurements. Okay, he's saying this does not comply with the regulation, this areaway. That's just what I pointed out to you. And then the zoning administrator goes on to say, it is clearly an areaway and can be considered as an existing non-conforming feature. As I read that, the zoning administrator is saying this is not an areaway as defined in the regulations, but is, quote, clearly an areaway. On what basis does he say that? I don't know. I do know that the clear language in the regulations does not factor into his assessment. And then he goes on to say it is, quote, an existing non-conforming feature. I looked that phrase up in various DCRA and Board of Zoning Adjustment records. I have no idea even what that means. In conclusion, we have regulations. In a civil society, these rules are what bind us together. It is simply insane to make up new rules or pick and choose what laws you think should or should not be enforced. Thanks.
Thank you, former Commissioner Gambrell. Any other hands or anything else that the residents have to say about this before we turn it over to commissioners?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Kate, and I don't have anything as informed or documented to share, but as a resident of Linear Heights for 9 years who lives on Ontario Place at the Adams Mill Road end, I am curious about any historical designations that would be relevant here, and just also I'm fully in agreement that I would hate to see my heart breaks at the idea that more higher level development would come to the neighborhood, because I love what exists currently. So thank you. That's all.
Got it. Kate, thank you. I think we have Alan again who can chime in on that.
Yeah, this is not in an historic district, so that particular thing is not relevant. There is a regulation regarding non-modification of a rooftop architectural element, but that's really not on the table with this resolution. Personally, actually, I'm not opposed to modification of row houses in terms of going from a single family to 2-unit, because it's allowable under the zoning regulations. And so I think that that's something I certainly would support if somebody wanted to do that within the bounds of what's allowable in the rules.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, so we also have a message from a resident. The commissioners, I want to make sure you guys are paying attention to the chat there. And we have another hand up. Julie, go ahead.
Hi, I live in the same co-op with Kathy Gilly, and I just wanted to say that we've sent in several letters supporting the appeal of the resolution. I think I said that wrong, but I think you know what I mean. We've all sent in letters, so we hope that you will refer to those. We've done that in the interest of time so that you guys don't have to listen to us all night. So thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Seeing no other hands up, Commissioner Zatoli or any of the other commissioners, is there anything else that you'd like to say here? Commissioner Guthrie?
Yeah, I'd just like to point out that this is a particular area that we've had continuing issues with the zoning commissioner about, that involve whether or not the rules get applied as they're written, or whether you do some sort of strange workaround to allow anybody to do whatever they want to do. And the residents of Lanier Heights went to a whole lot of effort to get the area downzoned to protect and continue the particular feeling and ambience of Lanier Heights as basically a row house district in the District of Columbia. And by voting for this resolution, we'll be keeping with the practice and history of the ANC 1C, which is that we don't discourage developers from coming to Adams Morgan. What we discourage them from doing is trying to do things outside the rules that everyone else is living by. So I heartily support the resolution.
Thank you, Commissioner Guthrie. Any other commissioners have any comments or anything to say? This came out of committee unanimously. I think it was a vote of 4-0. So hearing nothing there and seeing no other hands raised, call to a vote. All those in favor of the resolution as stated, please indicate so by saying aye.
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 Any against? Any abstention? I'm sorry, was there any?
Nay.
Is that 2 against?
I think so.
Commissioner Dendy and Commissioner Bowles, all right. And any abstentions? Okay, 5-0, passes. Thank you, commissioners. Moving on to the second item out of PZT, a resolution in favor of 17th Street protected bike lane. Commissioner Bowles, would you like to take this one?
Yeah, I can. Okay, so this resolution came out of committee unanimously, and we added 2 friendlies. Essentially, it is in support of connected and protected bike infrastructure, more specifically in favor of the 17th Street protected bike lane, which is going through a comment period and will be accepting continued comments until I think the end of this week. I know we're like at the very end of the cusp there. So yeah, I added the 2 friendly amendments, which essentially were the specifics for that ANC 2B asked. I know that the committee members really wanted to be one-to-one with the people who were doing the work. And I know that the folks that were doing the work in 2B, they're looking for, just support. They don't want someone to reinvent the wheel for them. They just want to be supported. So this is what we are doing. I think it makes a lot of sense for us to weigh in on this because I know a lot of folks that walk, and that bike just south, and 2B is the very nearest ANC to our south, and is a very popular travel corridor between DuPont Circle and Adams Morgan. So I feel like it's necessary to do that. And then the next component was to actually extend or ask DDOT to look at proposals to extend the protected bike lane to all the way up to Florida. And that encompasses my district. And I am in favor of that. And I believe that the PZT committee was also in favor of that, of resources being dedicated to look at that sort of proposal as well. Overall, oh, sorry, I could actually share the screen. That probably might be better. Or I guess we haven't been sharing the screen for the other stuff. If anyone has any questions.
For those that, for people that want to follow along, the resolution is in the chat. It's on our website at anc1c.org. So thank you, Commissioner Bowles, for doing this. This came out of committee unanimously. And there was a bit of work to add to the resolution, those specifics from ANC 2B. And so thanks for doing that and taking the time to put this thing forward. I see that there's a hand raised. Zach Gold, go ahead.
Thank you, Commissioner Ronnie. Thank you, Commissioner Bowles. I don't want to take a lot of time. It's already late. I just want to thank Commissioner Bowles and the PZT for taking my recommendation to add the connection of this bike infrastructure and all bike infrastructures that are near Adams Morgan to our neighborhood. I think that the ANC has in the past and appears ready to be continued to support a connected network of bicycle facilities in order to alleviate transportation stresses elsewhere and to provide safety to vulnerable road users. So thank you very much for adding that to this resolution. I appreciate it.
Of course, thanks for chiming in there, Zach. Commissioner Guthrie?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that I support this resolution, and it was particularly helpful to have Commissioner Downs from 2B who had been spearheading the process down in 2B to come to our committee meeting and explain to us what they were trying to do with this. But I think Zach's got an excellent point in that having a bikeway that leads you from point X to point Y does no good if you're at point Z. So we need to have this connectedness within the city. We've got significant transportational issues in the district that need further resolution, but I think this is a reasonable step to affect better use of the public space along 17th.
Completely agreed. So J.I. Swiderski, go ahead.
So similarly, I wanted to say that thank Commissioner Bowles for this, and especially the inclusion of the point that this needs to be further extended up 17th to Florida. I live just off of 17th between you and Florida, and I see in it is just as much as we see people trying to ride against traffic on lower 17th in DuPont. We see just as many people riding bikes against traffic up 17th. There is clearly a demand for this bike lane to continue all the way into Adams Morgan. So thank you for including that, and as well as for supporting the bike lane in general.
Great. Thank you, J.I. So we have Mr. James. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I don't think that the ANC 1C should be taking this matter up. It's not part of our ANC. It's as simple as that. There's an ANC in DuPont Circle. They can speak for that community. And ANC 1C has no business butting into the affairs of another community. And I say that with complete disdain for the proposal, because it's going to be, I heard Japer Bowles talk a lot about helping businesses and that sort of thing. Well, this is going to hurt the businesses on 17th Street, like the hardware store that I go to frequently. And when I'm down there, I often go to across the street to the Safeway, and sometimes to the 7-Eleven or to one of the restaurants along there and buy a bite to eat. So I'm there, 3 to 5 times a week in my vehicle, and there's parking behind the hardware store, so I often am able to use that, or street parking. Businesses need street parking to be able to survive. I can't carry a sheet of drywall or a 10-foot 2x4 home on my bicycle. It's really just, quite honestly, not to be unkind to those who are riding bikes. I ride a bike frequently myself. But to commute through somebody else's neighborhood and think that you need to have a protected bike lane when there's one just a couple blocks away over on 15th Street. It's really, it's not a just use of that street, which right now, by the way, is being used to benefit restaurants with dining in the curb lanes in parklets. So there's not enough room on that block, on those streets, to do this. And I really think ANC 1C would probably not appreciate some other ANC butting into stuff that's going on in this neighborhood. But the real key point is that there has never been a planful addressing of bike lanes by DDOT in this neighborhood, with community participation. It's just this catch on to something else that Commissioner Bowles and other previous commissioners like Bridget Pooley sought to do, So it's really not what you call good planning. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. James, for those comments. I'll say that it's not only reasonable. I think we have a responsibility to, and it's justified for ANC 1C to weigh in on matters that directly affect us. And we have been contacted and have weighed in one way or another with other things in the past. I can recall being involved in some discussion when assets, that ABC license came up, which is not in our ANC, but is in our neighboring ANC just across the street. I remember being in discussions about Local 16, which is also not in our ANC, but is right across the street from us. So it's very much something that I think we have the responsibility to do, just to address that procedural point that we do have the right and I think the responsibility to weigh in there. So I see a couple other hands come up. Commissioner Jackson, please.
Yeah, I strongly support this, and 17th Street, that's just a block behind my building right here. I've talked to the director of the ANC himself, and he says if ANCs want to work across boundaries, that's perfectly acceptable. It's coming right from the director's mouth. And in particular, 15th Street, there's been quite a few accidents and stuff. That's probably one of the worst designed bike paths in the neighborhood. So that's all I got to say.
Thank you, Commissioner Jackson, and that's pretty valuable. That brief input. You spoke directly to director of the Office of ANC, and he said that this is something that we should be weighing in on. So, thank you. And we have a couple other hands, and then we'll call to a vote. I'll start with Megan.
Hi. Yeah, I'm Megan Faulkner, and I live at the corner of 18th Street and Columbia Road. And I just wanted to say that as someone who works downtown at 11th and K, and anticipates probably using biking to commute to work when that becomes a thing again, and to get around more increasingly with, you know, public transit and other options feeling a little less safe right now. That I think the protected bike lane is great and directly impacts a lot of us in our neighborhood who need to get downtown and want a safe way to be able to do that. Especially, I know a lot of our neighbors don't have cars, and you know, we'll be relying on things like bikes and walking and things like that. So I just really want to encourage the ANC to support the resolution.
Thanks, Megan. Your support's noted. And J.I. Swerdowski, you have, go ahead. You have the floor.
Yeah, I wanted to, I guess, push back on a couple of things that Mr. James said. First of all, that, you know, like Megan just said, as a 1C resident, this does directly affect me. This is something that I would use, you know, as somebody who lives just off 17th Street. I do walk on 17th Street regularly. I bike on 17th Street regularly. So although this isn't directly in the neighborhood, you know, official boundaries, this is something that directly affects Adams Morgan ANC residents. I also would push back on the notion that businesses, you know, broadly and in particular the, you know, bars and restaurants on 17th Street, you know, absolutely need automotive parking. As a city planning student, as some of the commissioners know, I just finished a master's of planning this spring. And I have specifically researched the question of whether automotive parking or bike lanes or sidewalks or other things are most valuable to business districts. And in case after case across the country and around the world, business districts and even individual businesses have found that, in fact, they get more and better business from having more access to people who are biking and walking. And in fact, this particular proposal, as I understand it, would not even remove automotive parking. It would create space for deliveries and for pickups like at the hardware store, while also creating space for people to walk and bike safely.
Thank you, J.I., for getting into those details there. Okay, so any comments from commissioners?
Yeah, I just also like to echo the folks that are speaking up on this issue. I think that it is a mistake to say that things that are outside of our ANC are issues that we should not or do not have a responsibility to comment on. We all are residents of all of DC, and it would be like silly to say that the rest of the city does not affect us. I regularly bike around the neighborhood and in other ANCs, and those streets affect me. And, you know, obviously, I think it's good to connect with other ANCs, for ANCs to work collaboratively, and to say that we shouldn't, I think is highly incorrect. And also, DC is very car-centric, and it's really, you know, it's for me personally terrifying to bike around the city, although I do it anyway. And I would love to have a protected bike lane wherever I can. And it's great to feel relaxed when I can be in a protected bike lane. So I would support as many bike lanes as we can possibly have throughout the city, because I don't stay in the neighborhood. I'm going around all the time. So that definitely affects my life. I think it affects most people's lives. I'd like to just echo the person who said commuting to work. Soon we're going to be commuting to work. People should be safe on the road. And I think we know that a lot of cyclists have died because of how car-centric DC is. So this is really important to me personally, and also just for all of the safety of the folks who I know are cycling around the city. It's really important. So yeah, just 100% plus 100 more % support for this resolution.
All right. I'll ramp that up. 400% support. Let's call to a vote.
Yes.
All those in favor of the resolution as indicated came out unanimous from the committee. Please indicate so by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any against? Any abstentions? Okay, so passes 7-0, and we have a final item. Final item on our regular agenda, and then we'll get to one last item that Commissioner Bowles had mentioned. A tree plan for BB&T Plaza. This is we've been through this a couple of times now. We've had a few revised things going back and forth. So there was an original, just some background, the plaza that is adjacent to BB&T Bank, that's on the northeast corner of over at 18th and Columbia. DDOT's Urban Forestry Division came up with a plan. We presented that plan a few months ago. There's been some back and forth. A community member, one of the co-owners of Songbird, had presented a revised version that we reviewed at last month's meeting. There were just a couple of other issues. We circulated that amongst those involved at DDOT, and there was some feedback. And right now, commissioners, you'll see that in the August version, the most current version, that Alicia, the co-owner of Songbird, has drawn up, and she's been so generous with her time to do this, includes the feedback that was given to us by DDOT and by the bike group, and includes the utility vault. So this is basically the July plan, further refined, and incorporates some of the feedback that was received that makes this now possible, including a 10-foot wide passing lane next to the bike share station. So this is drawn out to scale. It's not drawn out to scale, but the 10 feet has been measured. Alicia took a tape measure over to that plaza. I don't think she's on the call right now, but if she was, I'd ask her to speak on this. But I'll say it anyhow, that I'm really thankful for having community members like that to take the time to do this. So the links are in the chat. So questions from commissioners? Questions from members of the public? Got one hand up. Kate?
Oh, hey. So then this would be a DDOT planting that would be maintained by them? Like trees selected and then maintained by them? That's all.
So it will be watered. The maintenance of the trees the trees get planted and it rains and it doesn't, so it'll be maintained to an extent by the Urban Forestry Division, but it's not that they come out to go water them or anything like that.
Am I still on? Can you send? So I'm a horticulturist. So, and I work with the government. The responsibility falls on the city. Ultimately, is my question. It's not as though there's another responsibility that falls on the community members to maintain.
No, that's correct. That's correct.
Gotcha. That's great.
Yeah, it is. And there are some planter pots indicated in the drawing, and those, we're in discussion. There's a possibility that the Adams Morgan bid might contribute some funds to get these planter pots purchased and placed. So, that's could also be a value added to the neighborhood. So we have a couple of other hands up. Mr. James.
Yeah, it's troubling, this process. It was troubling enough when DDOT secretly worked with the bid to come up with a plan excluding the rest of the community, and in fact the ANC. And now it's even more troubling that the ANC is having private communications with DDOT that, we just become aware of now about this other plan that's come forward. We have to just deal with the plan that came from DDOT. That's what's on the table. Hello?
Yes.
Okay. So, apparently, I don't know what's on the table here.
What are you doing? What are we doing? Go ahead.
It's getting a little confusing as to who's on the call right now. I mean,
Go ahead, Dennis. You're good.
so anyway, I think if I have to react, KCA already made some official comments approved by our executive committee on the DDOT plan, which we found to be very wanting. It ruined the space. It took up all the space, and it put in trees that were inadequate. They're not shade trees. The placement of them used up all the space that could be otherwise used. The bikes, I think should be left, and the KCA resolution said the same thing. They should be left where they are. They're making the pedestrian passageway much more narrow as you go eastbound on Columbia on that sidewalk. You're making a barrier. Like I'm looking at Alicia's plan. You're making a barrier to movement around in the space with the trees in line with the kiosk on both sides at 90-degree angles and other planters. It's junked up the space. Sorry, Alicia. But, it just seemed to me like this is just a whole bunch of little things sprinkled all around that make it an unusable space going forward. Just, it doesn't really provide much in the way of shade. Anyway, I think we just really need a couple of shade trees, nicely spaced, and then leave the rest of the space open. The DDOT's idea of putting the bike lane, the bike chair right on the curb negatively impacts the traffic, the buses that go by there. And just to gain a couple more bike share spots, it just seems like it's not worth it to move it. And again, when you're pulling in or pulling out of those bike share stations, then you're taking up almost the whole passageway. When it's a busy place where people walk, Adams Morgan is busy to start with, but this is on your way to CVS and Safeway and everything that's up in that direction. So I really don't think that this plan, Alicia's plan, is any better. In fact, in many ways, it's worse than the original DDOT plan, which was pretty bad. So I don't know what the ANC is going to do, but Calorama Citizens has already taken action on the plan that is relevant, the one that has been made public in a timely fashion before the community, only after the ANC forced the issue, which I appreciate, that it needed to be aired properly. But, I mean, if it's open season, I'll send in some ideas. Want me to get out my pen and paper? I'll be glad to do that. But let it be known that it's open season for anybody to come forward and say whatever they would like to say about a different plan for that space. KCA was merely critiquing what had come out of DDOT and the bid's secret meeting.
Thank you, Mr.
I'll leave it there.
Alan Gambrell.
Hi, thank you, Commissioner. Again, glad to see this. Actually, the plan was raised at the PZT, so I feel like that was a public process, and it's great that a community member would volunteer services, design services, to come up with a plan. So I wanted to really comment on that. But the other big thing I wanted to reiterate, and I mentioned this at the PZT earlier this month, is that I think it's really critical there be a water source there for two reasons. One, those trees, those plants will die without a water source. And I know it's a tricky situation in that environment because there's possibly no current water source. So maybe this is something the ANC can work on, perhaps with the two businesses that are at that location. Perhaps establishing a water source. I think not only for the plants, but also from the standpoint of this plaza being the future location of the farmers market, if and when the SunTrust Plaza actually is developed, which I think eventually that will happen. So it would be nice there be a water source there for the vendors who come in, the special events, to be able to do cleanup, as that space is going to get used a lot more in the future. Thanks.
Thanks, Alan. And yeah, we totally hear you about the water source, and it's come up a few times over the last 6 weeks. And I think what's happening is the bid and maybe one or two other folks are in touch with the owner of the building that houses BB&T Bank to possibly install a water bib there. So we have another hand raised. Kristen?
Yeah, hi, it's Kristen Barden from the Adams Morgan Partnership. Yeah, we are more than happy to help water the trees. We have, our clean team has a truck that has a huge water container on the back of it. And we use that to water the tree boxes, and we could easily use that to water the trees as well. So that's really not a problem. We're happy to do that. And yeah, as Amir mentioned, I'm not sure if BB&T Bank has a water spigot that's accessible from the exterior of the building or not. We can ask them, but in any event, we're happy to help water the trees. So that's not an issue. Yeah, the ANC has been a part of this process. DDOT came to us and told us that they had some funds to improve the retention of water in these kinds of open, spaces throughout the city. And we worked with them. We started this process last July. I think Japer was a part of that first meeting that we had with DDOT Urban Forestry. I think it was a year ago, July, that we started this. So the ANC has been involved since this was first discussed with UFA. And I'm really glad to see, the plans evolve so that there is a possibility of some shade there. I think that with the shade, that, brings the possibility of doing other things like benches. People will want to sit on a bench if there is some shade. Right now, there's no shade in that plaza at all, and it makes it really uncomfortable to be there. Part of the reason why the bid stopped doing our concerts was because it's just not a pleasant place to be when it's warm, because it is so hot. Even with a couple of tents, it's just really not pleasant. And the planter pots that Alicia shows in the drawing are great. And if we do have funding, we would be happy to help contribute to those. At this point, I'm not sure about that. It would probably be a fiscal year 2021 budget item, which would start October 1st. So we can explore that later, but yeah, certainly we're happy to look at that. And a big thanks to Alicia. I don't know if she's on the call or not, but for putting her landscape architect hat back on. She has been co-owner of Songbird and not doing as much with her landscape architect degree. So it's really great that she's stepped up and helped out.
Thanks, Kristen, for clarifying the points about watering. and also the public process. We have been talking about this for a few months. So we have Matt Wexler.
Hey, thanks, Amir. Yeah, this item has been on the agenda for several months now, and I've commented a handful of times during this period. I'm really pleased that this current plan was included for discussion at the PZT committee, and that Alicia, who has been very active as one of the Adams Morgan Commercial Development Coalition's co-founders, after participating in 2 months of ANC discussions, as well as seeing specific feedback from the community members, as well as from adjacent property owners at the BB&T Bank building, as well as the Southern Hospitality building, or the former Southern Hospitality building, stepped up. And as Kristen mentioned, Alicia is a professional and somebody who was willing to take the time and energy and effort to create something for community feedback. Again, in not a prescriptive manner, not in a secret manner, not in a closed manner, and in a very public and open and collaborative manner. I believe that the design here is much improved, and we should take great care to preserve and improve our public spaces in the neighborhood, because we don't have many to begin with, and given the fact that we need to emphasize during the pandemic, how important it is for outdoor activity and not just business, but just spending time outdoors is safer and healthier for everybody. We need to be very sensitive to making sure that this space is one that will be utilized, and that won't just be one that looks like it does today. I also believe that the result here is much better because of the collaboration in the community, rather than just having a few people take a look at one design that's put before us by DDOT and then accepting that as fact. So I'm very pleased with, and I think we should all be proud of the engagement over the last several months that's resulted in a more successful effort.
Thank you. Thanks, Matt. And Commissioner Bowles, go ahead.
So I'm really excited for Alicia's plan. I guess my question to whomever did follow up from the PZT committee, is DDOT able to implement Alicia's plan, either of these plans or any community plan? Are they able to? I thought that was a question that we proposed to Elite. I believe he was the coordinator from Urban Forestry. Was there an answer from that?
About whether, he's seen it and has also circulated it within DDOT, and we had feedback from the bike group, the bike share group, and that was also incorporated into this plan. So I think I'm happy that happened, because it kind of goes through that kind of vetting already. So
they can implement Alicia's plan. I guess what I'm getting to.
Correct. They can.
They can.
You cannot buy pots, though. The planters. So that's off the table. But as Kristen had alluded to earlier, perhaps there will be money in their budget for fiscal year 21, starting on October 1st.
Okay, so we're looking at the July version, correct?
We're looking at the August version.
The August version. So this is the one that has this is the one that we voted on and discussed, or you all voted on and discussed in committee.
We discussed the July version. We sent the July version out, and the August version. We sent the July version out for feedback, and that feedback was incorporated into the August version, which is what you're looking at.
Oh, I see. Okay, so is there a resolution in favor of a specific version?
the version you're looking at, the August version.
Okay, so August. Okay. Okay. I want to clear things up for a few folks. This is in my single member district, and it's actually something I ran on. There are neighbors, not just within my single member district, but businesses and people across, the community that want something to go into this space. And reaching out initially, DDOT was like, we can put trees here and that's it. So I'm glad that we're able to get more. My issue is that, I really hope that we don't limit bike share. DDOT's plan actually expanded the bike share station. So I look forward to whatever new plan we move forward to continuing to do that. And then ultimately just more livable space. Whatever the community agrees on, I'm fine with. I just want to be able to use this space. It's a really, really, really hot desert area during the summer, and it's miserable. And residents of my single member district where this is located have asked for this and want this. So thank you, ANC members, for seriously considering this, because it's an SMD ask, a bid ask, and now a community ask. So thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Bowles. Kristen, you had one other thing or a couple other things you wanted to add? Kristen, you're on mute.
Okay, am I unmuted? Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, two other things that I forgot to mention before. The reason for moving the bike share station, according to the DDOT bike guys, is to add more space and more capacity there. The current location is limited, so by moving it to the curb, they can add more bikes. And also, it's a safety issue. So there's a lot of people who don't cross at the crosswalk, who cross kind of mid-block there. By putting the bike share station there, they're a lot less pedestrians are a lot less likely to jump over the bike share station and try to cross the street. So it also makes that safer for pedestrians by limiting their access. And my understanding is that the farmers market, from my conversations with Esther Siegel over the years, that plaza doesn't work for them because they really need to park the trucks right up against the curb and load and unload right there. And they could never do that in that space there. That if they did need to move from SunTrust, that their next best option would be Unity Park, because they can park right against the curb. Whereas at BB&T Plaza, they can't. So that's been my understanding from my conversations with her. So I just wanted to let folks know that.
Understood. Thanks, Kristen. Commissioner Guthrie, did you have something you wanted to add?
No, I just had my hand up because I'd gotten a technical glitch and I was hearing you, but I wasn't able to do anything. But I'm back. Okay.
Always good to have you. And we have we have Mr. James, second go around. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I'll try to, let me just start over. One of the deficiencies that I see in the Alicia plan is that there's no seating. At least, I don't see anything that says seating. I'm not sure what exactly all the little dots are, but I don't see the word seating anywhere. And that seems to me to be something that should be included, especially if there's going to be shade, which I'm still not certain that this is going to provide shade or the right spacing. The trees shown look like they might get to be pretty tall, but is pretty tall what you want right there, where people will walk? Anyway, the main reason I wanted to just be heard again was about no seating, no benches. That's something, if we want it to be shady and we don't want to just stand around, it might not be an unreasonable thing to have some seating.
Okay.
And I'd like to just comment. It seemed to me that Mr. Wexler was pointing a finger at me about You know, something that I said, I believe that DDOT was in secret discussions with the bid, but I was not suggesting that was the case after the plans became known, and to do with Alicia's involvement. I'm not criticizing her involvement. I just don't really think her plan is very good. Neither is DDOT's. But anyway, main point, seating. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. To address the seating point, it's the issue with the seating is that there's no money for it. The as had been raised previously, we don't have, or rather, DDOT is not putting money towards benches, but that issue did come up in previous meetings. And Matt, you got one more thing? Matt Wexler?
Yep. Hey, Amir. Round 2 for me. I don't need to respond to Dennis. I love you, Dennis. I wasn't trying to get back at you. So you did get me fired up, though, Amir, about the farmers market. And the farmers market is always a topic of discussion about BB&T Plaza, about SunTrust Plaza. But you know where the farmers market should go? 18th Street. And it should be on the roadway, just like most of the farmers market in DuPont Circle is. And I was late to the call today, so I didn't get to chime in about Open 18th. So I'm going to take the opportunity, if you guys don't mind, right now, because I don't think it's on your agenda. We are not stopping. We're committed to it. And everyone in the community, I hope, is just as fired up as we are. We sent a detailed letter last Friday to government officials and to our council member. And please,
we
keep acting.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for chiming in. I think the relevant part there is the farmers market. It's not appropriate. They're having a hard time at BB&T Plaza. I completely agree that there are other areas in the neighborhood, including the reclaimed public space on 18th Street, where they could go. Any other comments? Hearing none, let's call to a vote. So all those in favor of the tree plan as presented, the August tree plan for the plaza next to the BB&T building, please indicate so by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any against? Any abstentions? Okay. All right, we have a couple of other items that aren't on the regular agenda. The first I'll say is Commissioner Wright. She has been volunteering her time, going the extra mile as secretary. We need to vote on having a new secretary. So I nominate Commissioner Jackson to be our new secretary.
And I heartily second.
Very good. Do I hear any other nominations or discussion? Okay. Hearing none, call to a vote. All those in favor of having Commissioner Jackson as secretary, please indicate so by saying aye.
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 Any against? Any abstentions? All right. Secretary Jackson. So the last item, Commissioner Bowles had alluded to in the announcements. Commissioner Bowles, you want to take it?
Yes, so I actually have 2 items. I need to pass a resolution stating where the checkbook has been relocated. So I would like to make a motion that the address of the check ledger be changed from 2426 Ontario Road Northwest, Washington, D.C. 20009, Unit 202 to 2426 Ontario Road Northwest, Unit 303, Washington, D.C. 20009. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
Okay, so that's here on, it wasn't on the agenda, it's now on the agenda. Anything else related to that?
Just a procedural process for those who are still on the call, part of the community, just knowing exactly where the checkbook and the ledger and all the information is for ANC 1C, where it's at. So
just a point of clarification, Commissioner Ronnie. Because it wasn't on the agenda, we need to have the preliminary motion that it would be in the interest of the neighborhood to consider this matter, even though we did not give prior notice, because we are required by the ANC statutes to have an accurate address for where the check register is at all times. And this would be, putting it on the agenda allows us to consider it and change. And so I'd need a second for that motion to put it on the agenda.
Absolutely, I thought that's what we just did.
I think he was making the main motion. And so I would suggest that we just have the procedural motion and vote, and then we can have a vote on the substantive motion.
yeah, we need to add the preliminary.
Commissioner Bowles moved to add it to the agenda. Commissioner Zatoli, did you second? Okay. All those in favor of adding it to the agenda, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Any against? Any abstentions? So 7-0-0. It's added to the agenda. Commissioner Bowles, did you want to move?
Let's call the question.
All right. So I move that we vote on the. I move the motion. I move to vote on the motion. Yeah.
You move that the address for the checks be changed as indicated
by Commissioner
Bowles.
Yeah, that's what I'm moving. So do I have a second on my movement?
Yeah, second.
Commissioner Jackson, thank you. So all those in favor of the motion, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any against? Any abstentions? Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Bowles, Commissioner Guthrie. And the second item, Commissioner Bowles, is.
So I was informed, I have been, or we recently passed a resolution, I believe in June or May, that related to the DC Board of Elections, essentially getting our feedback. And since then, there's been other ANC commissioners and news floating around. And the latest news that we have is that there are folks at the Board of Elections who are seeking advice and feedback from community partners, such as ANCs, on where ballot drop boxes should be located throughout the wards, and where voting centers should be located, and where early voting centers should be located. And so I thought that it would be, relevant for our community. Obviously, ANC 1C has been very and will continue to be very committed to a strictly mail-in vote. We pushed for that, and we will continue to communicate that that's the safest way for a ballot. However, the realities set in this primary election, and you saw people waiting until midnight and 1 a.m. to vote, and that to me, I just think is unconscionable and unconstitutional. So The mayor, as well as the council, and then the independent DC Board of Elections have come up with a plan to expand the voting centers. And I see it as our best interest to continue to give them advice, specifically towards the ballot drop boxes. I was notified that one would be located in Adams Morgan and that it would be located in the SunTrust Plaza. And then I was also made aware that 2 voting precincts instead of 3 would be opened. So that would include the Marie Reed voting precinct as well as the H.D. Cook voting precinct. And I forwarded, this email literally came out at 4:45 and then a follow-up email came out at 5:30. So I did forward them to you, commissioners. But what essentially this resolution is going to ask is that we do have at least the Marie Reed Elementary School voting precinct. I think that that would be the largest and would allow for queuing. But if other commissioners, and I'm totally amenable to what the community wants, to agree with the recommendation of having H.D. Cook. And then I would want to ask the ANC commissioners, which the precinct falls to, as to whether they believe that the church that is on Kalorama would also be another voting precinct that would be safe, or if they think that it would just be safest for us to just do H.D. Cook as well as Marie Reed. There was another thing that I thought that was really cool, is that they're actually expanding an early voting destination in ANC 1C, and this will be at the Hilton Convention Center. So that's, to me, really cool, because we want early voting, especially, I mean, just in general, but it does allow for more space, more time to safely vote and to, stop the spread of COVID-19, which has killed almost 160,000 people. And there's too many vulnerable people that, we shouldn't be putting democracy up against. So I think that there's a way BOE and our council members, led by Charles Allen from the Judiciary and Public Safety Committee, he has ensured that there is a working group, and there will be more information coming out. This is a moving target. But I think that, like in a lot of the things that we previously discussed, we want to continue to have a seat at the table, and we want to ensure that there is a voting center that we would be able to, have our folks easily be able to go to one, to cast a ballot, either early or same day. But of course, mail in your ballot. But that's basically the spiel. Michaela, were you able to share? I can share the resolution.
I can put the link up here.
And I think it would be wise for me to talk specifically about the resolves. So the first resolves pretty much states like, we want Marie Reed Elementary School to be at least Marie Reed to be a same day voting precinct. Again, I'm totally amenable if we want to nix that and have H.D. Cook or just the church, really whatever the commissioners would want. And what the community is asking for. But I just feel it's necessary that we should choose at least one to prioritize, because there is going to be at least 80 voting centers and at least 16 early voting centers. And as the most compact district and ward, or not district, but compact ward, we want to make sure walkability is an issue, that we can overcome, and just making easier access to voting. The next part essentially asks for the Board of Elections to work with us, a member, a delegate from the BID, KCA, and Recook Neighborhood Association to identify locations for the 24/7 drop boxes. That number originally seems pretty small in terms of how many drop boxes, but from what I've seen in the emails, they're wanting to increase that number drastically. So I think it would be wise for leaders from those different organizations to create a list of 10 that we could put throughout Adams Morgan, hoping that we could probably get our top 5. The reason why I think we should do this now as well is that this is essentially due on Friday, which is crazy. And we're literally going to be one of the only, if not the only ANC that would be able to weigh in on something like this. So I also think that the next part should also encourage, the Board of Elections to work with community members to essentially do what we're doing, being able to pass a community-based, resolution that works with all of the different stakeholders, and specifically those that are in less reliable public transit and that have less reliable mail service. I know that that's been an issue all across the district, but we see that as specifically targeted in certain areas that that want their voices heard the most and need their voices heard the most. So. With that, that's pretty much the wrap up. Our previous resolution in May is when it was. They pretty much agreed to all of those recommendations. I've read and heard stuff about pretty much all 8 of these, and they've even gone further. Our recommendation was just to send out an application, and they went ahead and are sending out full ballots to people. So please, everyone, vote by mail. But that's all.
Great. Thanks, Commissioner Bowles, for catching this. And I know I got a message from you just today about this, and I think you only found out about it today, too. And then for it to be due on Friday, and a lot of ANCs don't know about it. A lot of people don't know about it. A lot of ANCs don't even meet this week for something to vote something out like this. Who knows? I don't know where this is going. It's really something. So yeah, I am in support of this resolution. I'm glad you caught it and threw something together quickly. We have any other comments or questions from commissioners? Commissioner Guthrie.
Yeah, I'm really glad to hear that there's an early voting center at the Hilton. I think that's a good use of the space since the Hilton basically isn't being used right now. It seems to me that the preference should be towards Marie Reed, that I think is a little more centrally located to most of Adams Morgan than H.T. Cook. If they want to open both of them, that's fine. I always vote over Goodwill Baptist, but I can certainly go the extra block and a half to go to Marie Reed if that's necessary. I'm glad that they're looking out forward, trying to fix the problems that they had at the primary election, because there were substantial problems with only having a few centers open. So I'd be supportive of this and would suggest that Marie Reed be the designated one with a secondary location at H.T. Cook.
Is there, Commissioner Bowles, so that's a friendly of adding H.D. Cook as a secondary location, because Marie Reed is called out, right? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And I originally was thinking Marie Reed, and then I read their recommendations, and they were like H.D. Cook too, and I'm like, all right, H.D. Cook too, let's do it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. I remember waiting in line 2.5 hours, I think, for the primary vote. And I had asked for a mail-in ballot, by the way. Anyways.
Also, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that they're looking for poll workers and people to work election day as well as early voting. So please, if you have the time and you aren't affiliated with a campaign, please volunteer your time. And there's also paid positions too. So if you know a young adult, it's a great opportunity.
Okay. Mr. Dennis James, go ahead.
Yeah, I can see the district's interest in wanting to have control of the spaces. So like government-owned buildings like Reed and Cook, There's the firehouse on Lanier. There's Calorama Park Recreation Center building. I'm not so sure that the Hilton thing is, that's not very close to many residents. It is close to some, but there's also the police station, which, you know, there's the big community room there. There might be good ability to social distance there, but I'm not sure the ballots, not even sure that President Trump would consider them to be safe enough even in the police station. But anyway, the idea of drop boxes, though, I don't know exactly how that would work. Would it be permanently installed into, or, you know, in a permanent fashion into sidewalk or something like that, or into a brick wall like at SunTrust Plaza? Because people are used to voting at certain locations. I could see, you know, like if the district government didn't want to use Goodwill Baptist Church, maybe because it's not such a great social distancing space. I'm not sure about that, but my guess is it might not be. Maybe a drop box could be put there. And there's a beauty in keeping both Reed and Kirk because those are regular voting stations. So anyway, those are just my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. James.
And I can add to that in terms of the drop boxes. I think I would assume they would do different ones based on like locations. But honestly, I just don't know yet. I don't think they know yet either. So that could be another opportunity for being like, hey, you should only do these types or only do this type. And, you know, it should be painted a certain color. I mean, it's all new. And, you know, places are doing these things all across the country to ensure that democracy continues on in this pandemic. So, yeah, I mean, there's a ton of feedback that we can give.
Great. Any other comments from members of the community or commissioners? Okay, hearing none. I think we need a preliminary motion to add this to the agenda. So I move that we add the voting centers resolution as it was described to the agenda, based on the fact that if we didn't vote on this, ANC 1C wouldn't have a voice on this topic because the deadline to give our comments is Friday, this coming Friday. Have a second? Very good. So calling a vote to put this on the agenda. All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
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 Any against? Any abstentions? Okay, we're on the agenda. So I'd like to call to a vote on the resolution itself. So I move to call to a vote on the resolution itself. Do I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Jackson. All those in favor of the resolution as so described by Commissioner Bowles, please indicate so by saying aye.
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 Any against? Any abstentions? 7-0. So that's the final item for tonight. No committee meetings in August. So good to see you guys. And Michaela, enjoy Seattle. I hope we get to see you maybe one more time.
I'll miss you guys.
Yeah.
Still join in, I'll be virtual.
Yeah, I guess I could still attend.
We'll see you next
Would you like to continue? Would you like to continue taking notes?
I'll pass on that.